The story begins with the main character working in a big city in the very center. The company's office was located in a tall building on one of the floors of a skyscraper. It was very hot outside. The worker couldn't cope with the stuffiness. She felt like she was melting. The girl tried to cool herself with a small fan. She felt like she was being roasted. The telephone rang. The device stood on the table a short distance from the sofa. The worker was unhappy. There had not been a single client for her all morning. The girl was looking for her slippers to go to the phone and pick up the receiver. The device continued to ring persistently. The girl felt irritated. The worker looked at the phone with displeasure. She found it annoyingly loud. The girl came up and picked up the phone. She decided to talk to the client. The employee greeted the customer and said that he had come to a service store called 4Cs. The worker asked the customer again, "Does he need his air conditioner repaired?" Li King lay exhausted on the bed. The girl explained to her interlocutor that her worker had suffered sunstroke due to the heat. The main character was lying in a separate room. The client told the girl that he would pay extra for the service. The interlocutor told the girl that he was ready to pay more for the repair of the air conditioner. The worker answered on the phone that she would send a repairman as soon as possible. The girl entered her subordinate's room. She said that he needed to go to work. Li Qing lay on the bed without moving. He was in great pain because of the heat. The girl told her subordinate to get up. She received a call for service. Li Qing called his interlocutor Flora. He said that the heat was killing him. He felt that he was about to die from sunstroke. The main character didn't want to get out of bed, the girl told the guy. That a rich client was waiting for him and that big tips were possible. Flora said in a sly voice that the client who called had a sweet voice. She must be a beauty. Flora told the guy that the client should be home alone, so it would be inappropriate if she sent the guy to fix the air conditioner now. Li Xing jumped up from his bed. He said that it was very difficult to live without a working air conditioner on a hot day. The guy decided to go on a call. Flora told him that the client lived next to the ornamental garden. The main character was racing to the call on his scooter. He was smoking as he went. Li Ting looked around. He realized that his client must be rich. He was standing near an expensive building. The guard asked the guest with displeasure, "Why did he come here?" Li Qing replied that he came on business to see Madame Ayaz. The doorman told the guy to register before entering the hotel. Li Qing stood near the door. He realized that he saw the right house in front of him. The main character reached out and pressed the doorbell. He stood and waited for an answer. The main character wondered out loud if there was anyone inside the apartment. The doorbell rang loudly and persistently. No one was inside the room until someone came to the door. The hostess came to the door and asked the guy if he had come to fix the air conditioner. The girl opened the door and asked the guy in fear if he had come to fix the air conditioner. Li Qing looked at the girl with excitement. He confirmed that he had come for repairs. The hostess was drying her hair. She apologized to the guy for making him wait. The girl waved her hand at the guy and said excitedly that he could come in. The interlocutor complained to the protagonist that she was very hot. Li Qing was carrying a box of tools in his hands. The girl said excitedly that she started sweating as soon as she got out of the shower. Li Qing looked at the hostess from behind and said that he too was very hot lately. The main character asked his interlocutor, "Where's the air conditioner that needs to be fixed?" The girl replied that he needs to go to her bedroom. The main character excitedly thought to himself that he smelled a sweet scent. Li Ting asked the girl for a chair so he could reach the air conditioner, which was high on the wall. The hostess said that she would bring a chair now. The guy thanked her. Li Ting opened the suitcase with tools. He noted to himself that the hostess was very beautiful. The main character looked away. He excitedly noticed a pile of clothes lying on the bed. Li King was excited. He noticed the girl's outerwear lying next to him. The main character thought to himself that the hostess could have changed her clothes right after the shower. The guy was excited. He forgot about work and kept looking at the clothes. Li Ting slowly reached his hands towards the bed. He was excited and agitated. The main character wanted to touch the clothes. He looked at her with a fixed gaze. The guy grabbed his own hand with all his might. He didn't want to touch the girl's clothes. The main character told himself very sternly that he is a decent person. The hostess came into the room. She told the guy that she had brought him a chair. The sun rose higher and higher in the sky. It was very hot outside. Li Ting asked the girl for a screwdriver. He needed to disassemble the air conditioner. The owner brought the repairman the necessary tool. She asked again if she had given him the necessary screwdriver. Li Xing answered his interlocutor that everything was correct. He thanked her for her help. The hostess calmly answered the guy that there were no problems. She watched him closely. The girl asked the main character how much money he earns in such a job. Li Xing told his interlocutor in detail about his salary. The girl asked the guy again, does he have enough money to support his family? Li Xing continued to adjust the air conditioner. He told the owner that the evaporator coil was broken. The girl excitedly asked again, how can a coil affect cooling? The guy told the girl that he needed to take apart the air conditioner and look inside. The main character was busy with his work. At that moment, the doorbell rang. The hostess told the guy that someone had arrived. She added that he should continue his work. Li Qing felt relieved. He was very distracted when the girl stood next to him and talked to him. The guy took off the air conditioner cover. He decided that he could fix everything in 5 minutes. The sun outside stood high at its zenith. The heat continued to cover the city. Li Qing prepared to close the lid of the air conditioner. His work was finished. The guy sat down at the table tiredly. He decided that he would take a shower when he returned. The main character came to his senses with surprise. He realized that for some reason the girl had not returned to the room. Li Qing decided to walk down the corridor. He decided that the girl's husband had returned. The boy was frightened when he heard someone he didn't know say that they had captured the target. Li Qing realized that the call was coming from the living room. The stranger told the boss that they would soon return the girl to him. The main character looked into the room. He noticed a group of bandits in black suits. Li Qing became worried and scared. He looked at the strangers with excitement and did not know what to do. The main character realized that he was witnessing a home invasion and the kidnapping of a girl. Li Qing thought about it and became worried. He didn't know how he could hide further away now. The guy looked at the girl. He realized that she was not as arrogant as other rich people. The guy noticed that the captive's mouth was taped. Li Qingyu found the girl very gentle. The protagonist felt as if demons were fighting inside him. He didn't know if he should risk it to save the girl. The man ordered his subordinates to put the girl in the car. Li Qing became worried. He realized that the girl was already being taken away and he needed to hurry. The main character walked out of the next room into the hall with loud steps, and calmly, the bandits looked at the stranger with surprise. They could not understand who was in front of them. The hostess was also surprised. Li Qing played the fool. He said that he saw many guests around. The leader angrily shouted at the main character to stop and freeze. The main character suddenly and loudly dropped the toolbox from his hands onto the floor. The main character raised his hands up and told the bandits in a frightened voice that he surrendered. The criminals were surprised. One of them couldn't understand how the guy could get scared just by seeing their boss. The leader angrily asked the main character what he was doing here. Li Qing shouted in a very frightened voice for the boss not to kill him. In a frightened fit, the protagonist screamed not to be killed. He added that he was still a virgin. The bandits were surprised. They looked at the main character silently and suspiciously. One of the attackers, with a knife in his hand, asked the guy what they cared about what he had just told them. The leader looked angrily at the protagonist and demanded that he tell him the truth. Li Qing told the bandits in a frightened voice that he had come to this place to fix the air conditioner. The boss asked the girl, "Does he really see an ordinary repairman in front of him?" The hostess was surprised. She didn't expect the guy to run out so quickly. One of the bandits shouted that they needed to remove the tape from the captive's mouth. The girl explained in a calm voice that the guy had come to fix the air conditioner. She demanded that the bandits let Li Qing go. Li Qing shouted loudly to the kidnappers that he had nothing to do with it. The boss looked at the guy very angrily and called his subordinate named Zach. The leader ordered one of the bandits to kill the main character. The guy got scared. The bandit with the knife said that the guy was just a simple repairman and there was no need to kill him. The boss calmly explained to his subordinate that the repairman saw their faces. The leader explained that the main character must die. Li Qing sat and tried not to show his fear. The leader told his subordinate that he had to prove his loyalty. The bandit with a knife walked towards the guy. The subordinate angrily told the leader that he would do everything cleanly and neatly. The bandit swung his knife. He told the protagonist to blame only his own failure. The criminal shouted at the guy that he wanted to give him a quick death. He swung the knife. The main character got scared. He realized that he needed to fight off the criminal's attack now. The hostess was also scared. She realized that the bandits were going to kill the guy now. Li Qing reacted just in time. He raised his hand and grabbed the bandit's hand with the knife. The criminal was very surprised. He did not expect that the main character would resist. Li Qing looked angrily at the criminal and told him that he did not want to die yet. The main character suddenly accelerated and hit the bandit in the stomach with all his might. The remaining fighters were amazed. They couldn't believe that an ordinary repairman could knock one of them out with one blow. The main character stood and looked angrily at the uninvited guests. At that time, one of the bandits was lying on the floor. The boss looked at the main character angrily and displeasedly. He said that he was capable of something. The leader ordered his subordinates to take the girl to the car. He added that he would now take care of the boy's upbringing. The hostess looked away in fear. The subordinates told their leader that they understood him. The boss of the stall opposite the main character, he studied him with his eyes for a long time and intently. One of the bandits approached the girl and taped her mouth. She shouted at him to wait. The criminals approached the girl and grabbed her with their hands on both sides. Li King became scared and worried. He realized that his new acquaintance would now be taken away. The leader turned to the guy angrily and discontentedly. Li Qing was still thinking about the girl. The boss started to take off his tie. He angrily told the guy that he didn't have time to worry about others. The leader squeezed his hand angrily. He told the guy that he shouldn't forget about him. At this time, the criminals were carrying the girl away in their arms. They didn't like that she was resisting. The leader threw his jacket on the floor. He told the guy that he hadn't practiced for a long time. The boss's body was pumped up. He decided to check if he had lost all his fighting skills. At this time, the bandits were approaching the doors of the building. They were carrying a girl. The hostess tried to get out. One of the criminals was unhappy because the girl resisted. The kidnapper said thoughtfully that the guy was very unlucky. Li Qing came to fix the air conditioner at the wrong time. Another bandit happily said that now their boss He will torture the main character. At this time, the main character quietly crept up behind the bandit and swung a chair over his head. The criminal received a severe blow to the head. He did not have time to understand what happened. One of the bandits fearfully called out to his accomplice named Frank. He fell to the floor. The criminal was very surprised, along with the girl. They saw the main character alive and well in front of them. Li Ting smiled as calmly as possible and greeted the people in front of him. The bandit asked the guy in a frightened voice how he was able to defeat their boss. The leader was lying unconscious in the room. The bandit couldn't understand how an ordinary repairman could beat his boss so quickly. The boss, after a powerful blow, lay down and showed no signs of life. Li King stood and smiled calmly. The bandit still held the girl in his arms and did not know what to do. The criminal got scared. He turned around and ran at full speed. Li King swung his shoe with all his might and threw it at the bandit's head. The criminal was hit on the head with a slipper. He fell to the ground. Li Xing walked up to the lying kidnapper. He said cheerfully that he had used his finishing move. The main character laughed evilly. The girl behind him was still very scared. Li Qing approached his new acquaintance. He told her that he forgot to untie her. The agitated hostess drank a glass of water and put it abruptly on the table. Li Qing said to the girl with excitement that he hoped that she was not scared. The interlocutor answered the guy that she should thank him for everything. The hostess looked happily at the guy and said that he was very reliable. Li Qing explained to the girl that she had been very careless. He added that he could have bumped into her after entering her house. The hostess was unhappy. She asked the main character again what he had told her. The main character began to justify himself. He excitedly explained to the girl that he was a good guy. The hostess grabbed her head with her hand. She suggested that the guy quickly forget about everything. The girl sat opposite the main character. She looked at him with displeasure. The hostess told the guy that he could leave if he had no other business. Li He reminded the owner with a smile that she had to pay him for the repairs. The girl became agitated and perked up. She realized that she owed the guy money. The hostess turned around and ran into the next room. She told the guy that she was going for money. Li He reminded the girl to file a police report. There were still some tied-up bandits in the house. The hostess stopped. She realized that she needed to deal with the tied-up criminals. The girl grabbed the phone. She started dialing the number to call for help. The hostess called and asked the interlocutors to come to her villa. She explained that there were 4 people who wanted to kidnap her. Li Ting noted to himself that calling the owner was not at all like being called to the police. The main character thought that perhaps he saw a female gangster in front of him. The hostess decided to make another call. She dialed the number on the phone. The girl called the police. She explained that people had broken into her house and wanted to kidnap her. Li Ting breathed a sigh of relief to himself. He realized that help would arrive soon. Suddenly, the sound of a large number of feet was heard in front of the entrance to the building. Li Ting became very excited. He became alert because of the sound he heard. The protagonist clearly understood that he was hearing the sound of leather boots hitting the marble tiles. Li Qing realized that he could hear 4 people approaching the entrance very quickly. The hostess told her interlocutors on the phone that she was waiting for them and asked them to come quickly. The girl turned off the phone. The noise of approaching people could be heard outside. The main character suddenly rushed towards the girl with his hand outstretched. She got scared. The hostess turned away and asked the guy in fear, "What is he doing?" Li Qing was scared. He realized that it would be too late to help the girl now. The main character grabbed the girl in his arms. He realized that there were a lot of attackers and he couldn't defeat them all. The girl was scared. She asked the guy, "What did he just tell her?" Suddenly, the hostess swung her fist and hit the guy in the chest with all her might. Li Qing grabbed his chest. He couldn't understand what happened and why the girl hit him. The main character shouted at the girl not to run away from him. The hostess demanded that the guy not approach her. The girl started calling for help very loudly. The guy ran up to her from behind. The main character put his hand on the girl's face from behind and told her to be quiet. The girlfriend stopped screaming. She calmed down and realized that the guy didn't want to hurt her. Li Qing calmly told the worried girl that he wanted to save her. The main character went to the window. He told his interlocutor to look down. There was a black car parked on the street. The guy said that several people had just gotten out of the car. The hostess sighed in fear. She told the protagonist that this was not the case. At this time, someone ran up to the front door and kicked it down with all his might. Li Qing excitedly told the frightened girl that uninvited guests were coming to see her. The main character stretched out his hands to his girlfriend. He realized that he needed to hide her quickly. The hostess wanted to explain to the guy in a frightened voice what was going on. Li Qing hugged the girl and fell to the floor with her. He wanted to protect her. The main character, hugging the girl, rolled through the door into the next room. The main character told his girlfriend to hide well. He promised that he would take care of the rest. The door opened and a security guard in a suit ran in. He looked at the girl with fear. The hostess was lying on the floor. Above her was the frightened protagonist. The guest angrily asked the main character what he had done to the hostess. The girl jumped up and excitedly told the guest that the main character had saved her. Li Qing asked the guard and the girl in surprise, "Are they really acquaintances?" The hostess explained that her bodyguard was standing next to her. She had just called him. A police car pulled up to the building and officers jumped out. Footsteps were heard on the stairs. The police were running at full speed towards the door. The security forces ran into the apartment. They shouted to the girl that they had arrived. The hostess greeted the security forces. The policeman asked where the suspects were. The girl replied that they had tied up the criminals and locked them in the bathroom. Li Qing realized with displeasure that he would no longer be able to communicate with the hostess. He decided that he would not receive payment for today's service. Late in the evening, the main character arrived at his office on a motorcycle. The company was called the Four Seas Service Center. There was a sign near the entrance. Li Qing got off his motorcycle. He called his boss Hua and said that he was back. The girl angrily asked her subordinate why he returned so late. Li Qing explained to his interlocutor that servicing the client's home turned out to be very dangerous for him. Hua asked the guy excitedly what he had done today. The main character was very unhappy because his boss teased him. Hua looked at the guy with great displeasure and said that she was not afraid of him at all. The boss was sitting on a chair. She told the main character that she wanted to see how good he was. Li Qing was very unhappy and irritated. He didn't even know what to answer the girl. The main character got ready to smoke. He told his boss that he was going to take a shower. Hua asked her interlocutor with excitement, "Did he really encounter something?" The main character told the girl in detail about how his client was almost kidnapped by criminals. Hua stopped her subordinate's story in a very angry voice. The girl came up to the guy from behind and asked discontentedly, "Where is the service charge?" Li Qing explained to his boss that the client had to send the money to the office. The guy himself did not have time to receive the payment. Hua angrily asked if the money for the repairs was really used to buy cigarettes. Li Qing told his boss that the client lived in a prestigious area. He helped her escape. Hua looked at the guy with great suspicion. She didn't know whether to believe his words. After a long pause, the girl told her subordinate that he was absolutely right. Hua suggested that her subordinate go and eat something tasty for dinner. Li Qing squeezed the moisture out of the towel. He told the girl that she would not listen to him. The boss told her subordinate to wait. She wanted to go upstairs and change. At this time, an expensive car drove up to the service center and honked. Li Qing was dissatisfied. He could not understand why the arriving customer was honking at the door. The main character went outside and noticed his client with surprise. The girl looked around and said that this was the right place. The guy asked the girl with great surprise why she came here. He asked, "What happened to the kidnappers?" The client handed the guy some money. She said it was a service fee. The girl explained to the surprised protagonist that she had forgotten about him because of the mess. The hostess smiled at the guy and said that she came to thank him. Li King told the guest to come inside and sit down. The client entered the office and sat down on a chair. The protagonist turned on a fan for her. The client looked at the guy and said that she wanted to discuss something important with him. The excited protagonist asked the girl what she wanted to talk about. The client told her interlocutor that she wanted to hire him as her bodyguard. The girl told the main character that she noticed that he had good skills. Li King was silent. He didn't even know what to say in response to his interlocutor. The client explained to the guy that if he worked as her bodyguard, he would have a 5-figure salary. Li King began to count on his fingers. He wanted to figure out how much he would earn. The main character realized that he would earn 10,000. For him, it was a lot. The client told the guy that at his new job, he would earn more than he was earning now. The main character answered his interlocutor that he did not agree to her proposal. The client was unhappy. She asked the guy why he refused her. Li King explained to his interlocutor that he had never been a bodyguard and did not know what to do. He was used to working in the office of a repair company and did not want to go anywhere. The client looked at the protagonist and said that she did not want to force him. The client looked at the protagonist and told him to think about her offer. The guest took her business card out of her wallet and handed it to the guy. The girl told her interlocutor to come to her tomorrow morning. She was getting ready to leave. Hua came down in a black evening dress. She asked the guy who had just come to them. Li King said that today's customer came in. She paid for the service. The main character took out a wad of money. The girl rushed at it excitedly. Hua asked the guy with great interest, whose business card was he holding in his hands? The main character told his surprised boss that the client wanted him to become her bodyguard. Hua was surprised to read that the business card belonged to a girl named Lin Chu Chu from the Golden International Organization. The boss was very surprised. She realized that her subordinate was very lucky in his acquaintance. Hua told the guy that he had turned from a peasant into a phoenix. She couldn't believe that Lin Chu Chu would ever hire him as a bodyguard. The boss asked the guy what his salary would be. Li Qing replied that he would earn a 5-figure and added that he had rejected Lin's offer. Hua angrily grabbed the guy with her hands and shouted that he had gone crazy. The main character explained that Lin is ready to pay him a big salary. He himself does not know how to be a bodyguard. The boss was surprised. She told the guy with displeasure that he turned out to be a fool. Hua told her subordinate that he could earn a 5-figure salary, which was better than working for her. The main character said to his interlocutor with displeasure that he did not want to leave. Hua was very unhappy because the guy refused to be the bodyguard of the girl Lin. Li King told his interlocutor that he did not want to leave her for another job. Hua angrily shouted at the guy to stop saying stupid things. The girl told the guy that he couldn't work for her in the store forever. She added that Li Qing should call his new friend and say that he wanted to be her bodyguard. The protagonist answered his interlocutor that he would meet Lin tomorrow morning. Hua told the guy happily that she wanted to treat him. She asked where he wanted to go. The main character and his boss arrived at the bar late in the evening. Hua asked the protagonist with displeasure what they were doing in the bar. She explained that they would not be able to get enough of the drinks. Li Xing calmly explained to his interlocutor that he just wanted a drink. The boss explained to the guy that she was not firing him. She just wanted him to take advantage of the rare opportunity. The main character calmly replied to Hua that she was very kind to him. Li Xing will thank the girl for taking care of him for the past 2 years. The main character excitedly thanked his interlocutor for her words. Hua told her subordinate that she felt ashamed of him. The main character and the girl hit each other with bottles. Hua sternly reminded the guy to drink slowly. She explained that she had ordered him a lot of drinks and he had already drunk them all. The main character quickly got drunk. He moved his head to the girl's shoulder. The guy hugged his boss with his hand. Hua asked her interlocutor with displeasure, "Is he really drunk?" Li Qing asked the girl who she thought he was. The boss told the guy that no one would look at him. The main character asked his interlocutor if she considered him a good person. Hua looked at her subordinate with excitement and said that he was really a good person. The main character laughed to himself with displeasure and said that this might not be true. Li Qing extended his hand to the girl. She asked excitedly, "What is he doing?" The main character hugged the girl. He offered her to dance with him. Hua said she was unhappy with the guy because he was drunk. She added that she couldn't dance and asked her subordinate to let her go. Li Qing hugged the girl. He still really wanted to dance with her. The guy told his interlocutor not to be afraid and that he could teach her to dance. The main character stepped aside. He couldn't understand why the girl didn't want to dance with him at the bar. He shouted to Hao that no one would look at her because there were a lot of people around. Two strangers appeared from the side. They looked at the girl with excitement and interest. An unfamiliar guy came up to the girl from behind and started to persistently pester her. The stranger wanted to grab Hao from behind. At this time, the main character intervened. Li Ting grabbed the stranger and asked if he no longer needed his hand. The boy angrily shouted that he was in pain. He asked Li Ting to let him go. The stranger pulled his hand away and shouted that it hurt. The main character stood nearby and looked at him with displeasure. The stranger got angry. He didn't like that the main character stopped him in front of the girl. The guy ran up to the main character from the side and wanted to hit him with his hand. Li Ting reacted in time. He grasped his hand to block his opponent's attack. The main character hit his surprised opponent in the face with all his might. Li Ting swung his arm and punched the stranger in the face with all his might. It was fun at the bar. People were dancing and not paying attention to anything. The strangers were scared after the main character beat them up. They shouted for Li Ting to wait. After this, the offended guys turned around and began to run away quickly. Hua told her subordinate in fear that they had to leave. The fleeing strangers might call someone for help. The main character said with a smile that the escaped hooligans were like two naughty children. Li Ting approached the girl and hugged her. He said that he wanted to teach her to dance. Hua looked at her friend with excitement and said that she would dance a little. The main character agreed with the girl's answer. The fun continued in the bar. The stranger brought his friend the bandit. He called him older brother and pointed to the main character with the girl. Li Ting was dancing happily in the center of the hall with his girlfriend. People around him were looking at him. The main character happily told the girl that it was all very simple. The girlfriend answered with a smile that dancing was very easy for her. The bandit looked at the strangers at the disco with interest. He decided to approach them. The big guy came up and angrily addressed the main character and his girlfriend. The bandit told his interlocutors with a smile that he was interested in how formidable and ferocious his friend's offenders were. The guys laughed. One of them said, "It's funny that their boss is always so sharp." The girl didn't like that the guys were laughing at her. She shouted at them to stop. The bandit was surprised. He said very seriously that he liked brave girls. Hua looked at the big guy with displeasure and suspicion. She remained silent. The bandit looked at the girl with great interest. He said that she was very hot. The main character asked the stranger what he wanted from them. The big guy looked angrily at his interlocutors and said that they had two options. The boss demanded that the main character give him 100,000 as compensation for the treatment of his friends. The bandit angrily suggested to Li Ting that his girlfriend spend the night with them. One of the guys said very angrily that they would treat Hua well. The girl was very unhappy. She said that 100,000 was a very large sum. Li Ting turned to his girlfriend with excitement. The main character explained to the bandit that they did not want to cause trouble. From the very beginning, two unfamiliar guys began to pursue them. The big guy got angry. He knocked the cigarette out of the guy's hands and grabbed him by the clothes. The bandit sternly asked Li Ting if he was really accusing his brothers. One of the guys said very angrily that the girl asked for it herself. The main character swung his arm and hit the bandit in the face with all his might. The boys were very scared. They called their leader in fear. One of the criminals angrily shouted at his subordinates to catch the main character. The guests on the dance floor watched everything that was happening attentively. An excited Hua stood nearby. The administrator shouted to his subordinates to have the guards throw out all the participants in the fight and call the police. Very soon, a police car arrived and security forces ran out of it. The woman angrily shouted at her subordinates to detain the participants in the fight. All participants in the fight were brought to the police station and interrogated. The policewoman sternly told the detainees that they learn bad things in gangs and start fights. The woman shone a flashlight on the main character and sternly asked, "What is his name?" Li Ting covered himself with his hand. He shouted angrily at the woman that he was going to go blind. The woman very sternly asked the guy about his name. The main character was sitting at the table. He calmly answered the woman and told her his name. Hua told the police officer excitedly that she and the main character were innocent of the fight. The policewoman asked her interlocutors, what kind of showdown did they have with the Black Tiger gang and why did the fight start? She asked the main character, what gang was he from? Li Ting was outraged. He told his interlocutor that he was an ordinary person and was not a member of a gang. The woman asked the main character with distrust, is he really an ordinary person? The policewoman explained that the crime boss was knocked out with one blow. The main character explained that ordinary working people must be strong. The woman told the guy that he was able to defeat 10 opponents on his own. This cannot be done with brute force alone. She decided that the main character was training somewhere. The main character looked at the policewoman with great attention. He was thinking what to answer her. Li Qing closed one eye. He told the woman that her collar was very open. The policewoman was surprised. She couldn't understand what the main character wanted to say. Li Qing told the woman that she was very nice. He explained that there were many people who cared about her. The woman got angry. She slammed her hand on the table with all her might. The policewoman realized that the guy was very suspicious and wanted to somehow change the subject. Li Qing asked the woman what she wanted to do. The policewoman walked towards him. The woman looked at the guy very sternly and suspiciously. Li Qing became worried. The main character stared at the woman's chest with great attention. The woman told the guy that he wanted to change the conversation. She asked if he really knew martial arts. The policewoman explained that a local gang had hired several powerful killers. The main character felt that he could smell the woman's body. He decided that the policewoman wanted to catch him using his own weakness. The policewoman looked sternly and asked the guy if he was a gang member. A girl ran into the room. She excitedly called the inspector. The subordinate reported that the protagonist did not start the fight. The instigators were the punk gang. The protagonist does not need to be interrogated any further. The inspector turned to the side and told her subordinate that everything was clear to her. The woman told Strictly Guy that next time he wouldn't be so lucky. She advised Li Qing not to come across her again. The girl happily greeted her friend after his release. The subordinate asked the inspector with concern if everything was okay with her. The policewoman said that Li Qing was not such a simple guy. She asked her subordinate to bring his file. The girl answered her boss that she would do everything just like that. The policewoman asked her subordinate to go and do the job. The girl looked at her boss with excitement and turned to her. The inspector turned to her subordinate questioningly and with displeasure. The girl was scared and told her boss that a button had come off her shirt. The woman realized that the button had come off when she raised her hands during interrogation. The subordinate told the inspector that she always helps her sew buttons back on. The protagonist silently watched the conversation between the police officers. The girl asked the main character with great excitement what had happened to him. Li Qing smiled at his girlfriend and said that he was fine. He suggested that she go home. The main character and his girlfriend returned to their office. At this time, the police were studying information about Li Qing. The subordinate told her boss in surprise that Li Qing's case was very strange. The girl read that a 25-year-old guy had returned to the country 2 years ago. There was no other information. Hua called the main character by name. They were in the service center building. The girl told the protagonist that she had washed herself. Now it was his turn. The main character was carrying a basket of things in his hands. He was heading to the shower. The guy was washing himself in the shower and humming a melody to himself about how good his skin was. Li Qing stood in the shower under the streams of water. Large scars were visible on his back. The main character's entire body was covered with various bright cuts. The guy's figure was pumped up. His appearance was spoiled by a huge number of scars. The main character arrived to see his new friend Lin in her office building. The girl greeted the guy. She asked again, would he agree to become her bodyguard? The main character explained to his interlocutor that he agreed to work in her company as a repairman. The girl was very surprised. She couldn't understand why her friend wanted to work as a repairman. Lin decided to herself that she would hire the guy. Then she would try to persuade him to become her bodyguard. The girl contacted her subordinate named An Qing and told her to come see her. Lin told the protagonist that from now on, he would be working in the maintenance department. The secretary asked her boss about the new employee. Lin told her subordinate that Li Qing would be working in the maintenance department. The guy had to fill out a form first. An Qing told the protagonist to follow her into the next room. The main character was sitting in an office and filling out a questionnaire at a table. Li Qing brought the completed form to the secretary and said that he had filled it out. The secretary read the form carefully. She told the guy that he had not written his phone number. Li Qing smiled at the woman and said he didn't have a mobile phone. The secretary was surprised. She couldn't believe that one of the young people didn't have a mobile phone. The woman led the protagonist down the corridor to the office where he was supposed to work. Inside, one of the workers was eating lunch with a great appetite, not paying attention to anything. The secretary came in and said dissatisfiedly to the employee that he was having lunch during working hours. The man turned around with displeasure. He did not understand what the woman wanted from him now. An Qing told the worker sternly that she would deduct the money from his salary. The secretary told the man that she had brought him a new colleague. Li Qing stood next to her. The main character told his new colleagues that it was nice to meet him. He gave his name. The guy was sitting on a chair. He said discontentedly that he was leaving this job tomorrow. The main character asked his interlocutor, "Is he really quitting?" The worker said that the company has a lot of rules. The workers fix a lot of things for an average salary. 2 people have already left. He himself plans to quit next month. Li Ting started working at his new place. A telephone beeped on one of the tables. The colleague told the main character to pick up the phone with displeasure. The guy replied that he would do so. Li Ting answered the phone. The girl from the lingerie department said that her computer was malfunctioning. She asked me to come and fix it. The main character asked his colleague where the lingerie department was. The guy replied that he needed to go to the 15th floor. The main character went up to the desired 15th floor in the elevator. Li Ting got out of the elevator and asked the girls which one of them had a computer problem. The workers were sitting at their desks and were busy with new clothes. They didn't answer the guy. A girl in a red dress looked out of the room. She told the guy to come to her. The main character noticed that the girl looked very young. He decided that she was an intern. The worker came up to the table. She told the guy with displeasure that her computer was broken. The main character looked around carefully. He told the girl that he would fix everything in 10 minutes. Li Ting fixed the machine very quickly. He pressed a button and told the girl that everything was ready. The computer started up. The main character saw a screensaver with a tied-up girl on the monitor. The main character was silent and looked at the screensaver on the girl's computer with great surprise. The worker got scared. She realized that she had completely forgotten about the screensaver on her desktop. The worker told the guy that he could leave if he had already fixed the computer. The girl wanted to say goodbye to the guy. He looked closely at her back. Li Ting decided that he saw the same worker on the screensaver. The girl ran up to the guy excitedly and said that he should have already realized that it was her on the screensaver. The worker looked closely at her interlocutor and told him not to tell anyone about her. The girl angrily grabbed the guy by the clothes. She promised to beat him up. The clock showed noon. It was time for lunch. The main character decided to have a snack. Li Ting looked around and noticed with displeasure that he had not brought any cash with him. He needed to withdraw cash from the bank to have lunch. The main character went outside and approached the bank building. He went inside. The guy stood patiently in line. There were other customers in the row in front of him. The main character heard some criminals talking to each other. They were preparing for a robbery. The protagonist listened attentively. He noticed with suspicion that 2 people next to him were planning a robbery. Li Ting thought excitedly to himself that perhaps the strangers did not want to rob the bank. He noted that there were many people around. The main character noticed his new boss, Lin Tiu, entering the bank office. He didn't understand what the girl was doing there. Li Ting saw that the girl was carrying a suitcase in her hands. He decided that it was full of money. The main character became worried. He realized that the situation could end badly. Li Ting grabbed the girl's hand. Lin was very surprised when she saw her worker next to her. The girl asked her subordinate with suspicion, how could she help him? The main character sternly told his interlocutor that there were some problems with the bank. He advised the girl to leave. At this time, the secretary of Anne approached. She sharply knocked the main character's hand away from the hand of his boss. The secretary sternly told the guy that he had to speak if he wanted to say something. She added that the guy couldn't touch Mrs. Lin. The main character wanted to warn his interlocutors that this bank could be robbed now. At this moment, shots suddenly rang out. Bullets flew towards the ceiling. In the center of the bank stood a group of robbers in masks. One of them shouted at the people to all lie down on the ground and not move. The masked robber told people to put their hands behind their heads and crawl into the reception area. He threatened to kill anyone who tried to escape. The girls were very scared and sat down on the floor. The main character told his girlfriends to do what the robbers said. Li Ting told his boss to give the suitcase to the robbers if they saw it. The criminal raised his weapon up. He told the hostages to quickly go to the reception area. People were very scared. The robber shouted at them to go quickly to the next room. The hostages went into the bank's reception area, followed by the criminals. The robbers angrily shouted at people to leave their phones here. The protagonist realized that the robbers were very attentive to details. This proved that this was not their first robbery. He decided that the masked criminal had a gun. Li Ting noticed that there were 4 criminals. He saw something strange among them. One of the robbers took a huge red fire extinguisher in his hands. He tried to smash the glass of the cash register with all his might. The main character looked at the criminals carefully. He was very excited. The bandit told his boss with displeasure that he could not break the glass at the cash register. The leader told his subordinate that if they didn't break the glass, they wouldn't be able to get the money. He demanded that Monday continue beating him. The main character was sitting with the other hostages near the wall. He noticed that the criminal was looking closely at his watch. Lichin couldn't understand why the robbers didn't know that the bank had bulletproof glass. The main character noticed with surprise that one of the criminals was holding some kind of portrait in his hands. The guy noticed that the girl in the criminal's portrait looked like a tench. The main character became worried. He realized that the main goal of the criminals might not be to rob a bank. The robber looked carefully to the side. He noticed the main character and addressed him. The hero was scared. He looked at the criminal with great excitement. The criminal pointed his finger at the main character and told him very sternly to stand up. The leader pointed to the two girls behind the main character to stand up as well. Lichin became excited. He realized that the criminal might recognize his boss Lin. The robber looked closely at the drawing and the girls in front of him. The main character suddenly rushed to his friend. He started calling her by her name, Chu Chu. The criminals were very surprised. They looked around at each other in silence. The main character hugged the excited secretary. He shouted that he would save her. Anne was surprised, but kept silent. The main character shouted to the secretary that they would be together forever. Lin stood and was silent. Next to her stood the robber silently with a drawing of her portrait. The criminal asked the main character what he had just called the woman. Lichin asked the criminals angrily what they wanted to do with Chu Chu. The secretary couldn't understand why the guy called her Chu Chu. She decided that the robber's target might have been Lin. The criminal asked the secretary again if she was Lin Chu Chu. The secretary calmly confirmed to the kidnapper that her name was Ling Chu Chu. The criminal showed his accomplice the picture and said that there was some similarity. The bandit looked at the portrait for a long time and carefully, he said that he didn't think so. At this time, a police car pulled up and officers ran out of it. The inspector told her subordinates to surround all exits of the bank. The police decided to wait for the SWAT team to arrive before taking action. The woman told her subordinates that they should try to protect the hostages. The criminals continued to remain in the bank. There were a lot of hostages around them. The subordinate approached and addressed his boss. The boss was still looking at the picture in his hands. The bandit held a telephone in his hand. He explained that the police should have been notified by now. The boss stood and silently continued to look at the picture. Opposite him stood the secretary. The subordinate told the leader that they could not delay any longer. He explained that they had no more time. The leader told his subordinates to tie up the secretary. He explained that this woman would be their main hostage. The bandit approached the cash register glass. A frightened hostage was hiding below. The criminal pulled out a gun and pointed it down. He shouted to the worker that he saw him. The leader said that he saw a woman hiding under the table below. The criminal shouted at the woman to throw all the money out the window. He threatened to shoot her in the head. The robber was packing money into a bag. He was getting ready to leave with his accomplices. One of the subordinates ran up to the boss and reminded him that time was running out. The criminal threw the bag with money over his shoulder. He told his subordinates that they needed to leave with the hostage. The main character suddenly fell to the floor and grabbed the attacker by the leg. The main character held the criminal by the leg. He shouted that he wanted the criminals to take him too. The bandit turned around and angrily shouted at the main character to leave him alone. The subordinate told the boss that they needed to take the main character with them. The police should arrive soon. One of the criminals asked the guy with displeasure why he was making such big sacrifices for his girlfriend. A police car with backup pulled up to the bank building. Employees got out of it. The inspector sternly told her subordinates to be careful. The woman commanded the rest of the police that it was time to move out. The bandits sat in the car and looked at the police from inside with great interest. The criminals remained sitting in the car while the police ran into the bank. The criminal said with a malicious laugh that the police are very stupid. The main character sat in the back with his mouth tied. Lin told the police officers who came in that they were too late. She explained that the robbers had just left with the money and the hostages. The inspector ordered his subordinates to check the video from the surveillance cameras. They needed to determine the model and number of the robber's car. The woman ordered officers to set up roadblocks on roads near the city. The inspector said that it would be very difficult to find the criminals if they left the city. They needed to catch the robbers as quickly as possible. The car with the criminals and hostages stopped near a traffic light. The subordinate asked the boss with displeasure what they would do with the extra guy. The leader took off his mask. He told his subordinates that they would bury the guy. The worker told the inspector that they had identified the robber's car. It turned out that the license plate on the car did not belong to a minivan. The woman realized that the vehicle had fake license plates, which meant that the robbers weren't stupid at all. The inspector said that it would be very difficult for them to catch the robbers. The subordinate asked the woman what they should do now. The woman said with concern that the criminals might have a backup plan. The main character was sitting in a car with the criminals. He noticed that the bandits were completely calm and confident that they would be able to escape. The car stopped unexpectedly. One of the criminals said that they had arrived at the right place. The main character became worried. He couldn't understand why they came to this particular place. Li Qing looked ahead with excitement. He did not understand what was happening. The driver shouted to the passengers in the car to try to hold on. The driver hit the gas pedal with all his might. The car rushed forward. The main character saw a truck from the front. He realized that their car could collide with it. The car was racing at full speed and approached the truck from behind. The driver in the car looked ahead with great attention. He was getting closer and closer to the car in front. Suddenly, the truck's tailgate opened while it was moving. Its body turned out to be empty. The passenger car began to gradually rise inside the truck at full speed. The body lid began to rise up and pull the car inside. The criminal looked at the main character. He started laughing. He said that the guy was afraid that they might crash into a truck. One of the bandits decided to remove the tape from the main character's mouth so that he could speak. The criminal told the guy that the girl, Lin Qiu, was the general director of the Golden Age Company. The main character asked the criminals in surprise if they really knew Qiu. At that time, the secretary sat silently with her mouth tied. The leader angrily ordered all the people in the car to get out. The main character was sitting with his female friend in a metal container. Li Qing explained to his secretary that he absolutely did not understand what she wanted to tell him. There was a loud knock from the outside of the container. The accomplice told the boss that they had arrived at the location. The truck stopped in the mountains on a deserted highway. There were no other cars around. The criminals pushed the car and it immediately sank. A group of bandits stood on the road. They looked after the sunken car. The criminal explained that the police would not find them because the car was no longer there. The subordinate asked the boss with interest what they should do with the guy. The leader told his subordinate that there was a shovel in the car with them. The subordinate ran to the side and said that he would now get a shovel. The secretary looked at the guy with excitement. The driver leaned out of the truck's cabin. He told the bandits that they wouldn't be able to bury the guy here. The bandit asked the driver what they should do. The man told the guy that they needed to bury Li Qing on a deserted hill. The secretary was very excited. The main character was standing next to her. The boy asked the driver to take them to the nearest place where they could bury Li Qing. The driver told his subordinates that he knew of a place nearby. The bandits loaded into the truck and the car sped down the road. One of the kidnappers looked at the secretary and said that Ling Qiu was indeed very beautiful. One of the criminals looked at the woman and said that they could have some fun with her. The leader angrily told his subordinate not to do anything with the captive. The boss explained that they had to deliver the woman to the villa that night. The main character suddenly laughed to himself. He was still sitting tied up. The criminal angrily asked the guy what he was laughing at. He reminded the main character that they wanted to bury him. Li Qing looked at the boss and said that he was as stupid as a pig. The bandit looked angrily at the main character and asked again what he had just said. The car with the criminals was racing along the road at full speed. The bandit told the driver that they needed to go faster. The man replied that it would be very dangerous to speed up. The robber explained to the driver that the sooner they dealt with the main character, the better. The boss grabbed the guy by the clothes and shouted that he was really impatient to die. The main character calmly looked at the kidnapper and said that he made 2 mistakes. The bandit grabbed the guy by the clothes and asked what mistakes he had made. The main character freed one of his hands and hit the criminal in the stomach with all his might. The bandits around were very scared and alarmed. They could not understand how Li Qing was able to free himself. The main character swung. He decided to finish off the leader with another powerful blow from his hand. Li Qing hit the bandit on the head with great force. The boss fell unconscious to the bottom of the container after a powerful blow. The criminals ran up to their leader in fear from all sides. They wanted to help him. The main character threw the phone from his hands onto the floor. A loud sound was heard. One of the bandits looked at it fearfully and recognized his phone. Li Qing explained to the bandit that he took his phone while he was talking to him in the minivan. The criminal asked in surprise, "Is it possible that the main character was released much earlier?" Li Qing handed his interlocutor a telephone. He added that the police would arrive soon. The bandits viciously attacked the main character. They wanted to kill him. A fight broke out inside the truck. Loud bangs and loud noises were heard all around. The guy looked at the drivers and said that strange sounds were coming from the back of the car. The driver said with a smile that the long-haired guy couldn't control himself after he saw a beautiful girl. The bandits were tied up and their mouths were taped. Their boss was lying unconscious on the floor. The main character took a gun in his hands. He told the bandits that he wanted to deal with their boss. Lee King handed the weapon to the secretary. He said that he had a task for her. The main character asked the girl to look after 3 bandits. She asked her interlocutor with excitement what he was going to do. Lee Ting turned around. He told the girl that he wanted to stop the truck now. The truck was racing at full speed along the road. The main character approached the back of the truck. Lee Ting opened the back door of the truck and looked ahead carefully. He was thinking about how to get out. The secretary asked the guy in fear, why did he open the door? She was afraid that her friend would want to jump. The main character took off his top shirt. He told the woman that he couldn't leave her and run away. Lee King explained to the secretary that he would take responsibility for it. He promised that he would return and safe and sound. The main character grabbed the back gate and tried to climb out. The guy grabbed the door with his hands. He needed to climb up as quickly as possible. The secretary looked at her friend with concern. She understood that the guy was in danger. The main character grabbed the roof with one hand and the door of the car body with the other while driving. Lee King pulled himself up with his hands and was able to climb onto the back of the moving truck. The bandit glanced in the rearview mirror. He noticed something very suspicious. The criminal shouted to the driver to wait. The man asked in fear what had happened. The bandit said excitedly that he noticed some shadow on the roof. The robber said that he wanted to go and check everything himself. He told the man not to stop. The main character completely hid on the roof so that he could not be seen. The bandit moved along the side of the car. The truck was racing at full speed. Suddenly, it skidded slightly to the side. The robber grabbed the body of the truck with his hand from above and looked around carefully. The criminal looked in all directions from above the body. He grabbed the pistol with his hand. The main character grabbed the body with his hands from above and hung from the side so that he could not be seen. The bandit looked around very carefully and decided that there was no one near him. The criminal stood on the roof of the car with a gun in his hand and looked away. The main character swung his leg sharply to hit the robber with all his might. The criminal was unable to hold the gun. The weapon flew to the side. The gun fell onto the metal body. The criminal would no longer be able to reach it. The robber turned around sharply and attentively. He did not understand who could be next to him. The robber was very surprised when he saw the main character next to him. He couldn't believe that the guy could get out. The criminal sternly asked his interlocutor where the boss and the other fighters had gone. Lee Ting asked the bandit with interest. What did he think? Where did his accomplices go? The criminal put brass knuckles on his hands. He told the guy that he was very talented. The main character realized that it would not be easy for him to defeat the bandit with brass knuckles. The fighter took a stance opposite the guy. The main character prepared to fight back. Lee Ting said with a smile to his opponent that he had not been so excited for a long time. The main character prepared to repel the attack. He took a fighting stance. The robber swung his arm with all his might to knock the guy down with one blow. Lee Ting dodged the dangerous blow with a very sharp movement to the side. The main character put his hand forward and was able to block the dangerous blow. The bandit flew to the side after the blow. The main character managed to defend himself. The criminal began to move forward along the body to hit Lee Ting. The robber swung his arm to knock down his opponent with a powerful kick. Lee Ting covered himself with his hand and was able to defend himself from the dangerous kick. The bandit angrily told his rival that he had no abilities. The protagonist was warming up his hands. He told the bandit not to be arrogant. Lee Ting did not expect his opponent to deliver such powerful kicks. Lee Ting flexed his fingers. He told the bandit that he did not forget about training. The protagonist got into a fighting stance and told his opponent that they were continuing. The driver behind the wheel was worried. He couldn't understand why the bandit was taking so long to return. The car braked sharply and turned to the side. There was a loud noise. The criminal swung his leg sharply to knock down the protagonist with a powerful blow. The main character managed to grab his opponent's leg. He looked at the gun on the side with excitement. Lee Ting realized with great excitement that he could not allow the bandit to take up arms. The robber strained himself with all his might. He decided to try to get out. The bandit pushed his foot away from the body with all his might. He decided to jump up. The main character was stretching his hand to the side. He didn't notice how the criminal broke free from his grip and jumped up. Lee Ting saw a pistol lying very close to his hand on the metal body. The criminal jumped on the main character from above to kick him down. Li Qing dodged in time. The bandit swung his arm with all his might. He wanted to hit his opponent. The guy dodged to the side. The criminal swung his fist at the metal body with all his might. The robber got angry. He couldn't understand why he couldn't hit the guy. The driver continued to drive the truck. Suddenly, he noticed something suspicious in the rearview mirror. The driver was very scared and worried. He realized that a fight was continuing on the roof of the car. The main character strictly demanded that his opponent surrender. The robber got angry. He looked at the main character with great hatred. The main character warned the bandit that if he fell from the car, he would certainly die. The bandit answered the main character in a submissive voice that he surrendered. Li Tin told his opponent to get up. He reminded him that he was holding a gun. The criminal began to slowly and gradually climb up the side of the car body. The bandit looked at the main character with a sharp glance. He decided to attack him again. The robber thrust a sharp knife into the protagonist's leg with all his might. Li Qin was frightened. He suddenly felt a very strong pain in his leg from the injury. The main character kicked his opponent with all his might, and he started to fall down. The robber fell down and rolled along the asphalt. He managed to cover his head with his hand. The main character grabbed the knife that was sticking out of his leg. He said that the bandit was hiding a weapon. Li Xing felt very strong pain. He pulled out the knife and decided to throw it away. The protagonist threw the weapon aside. The knife flew across the roof with a ringing sound. The guy suddenly turned around in surprise. He noticed someone standing next to him. The main character noticed a very familiar man on the road. He realized that he had seen him somewhere before. The driver stood on the side of the road. He waved his hand in greeting to his passenger. The main character got scared. He realized that he saw in front of him the driver who used to drive his truck. The main character was moving along the side of the truck. He wanted to get into the cabin. The guy tugged at the door and noticed with horror that the door to the cabin wouldn't open. The protagonist realized that the driver had used a stick to block the gas pedal. The man himself jumped out of the cabin. The guy continued to pound the glass with his fist as hard as he could. He realized that the truck might soon reach the turn. The main character continued to knock on the side window. He still hoped to get inside. Li Qing thought excitedly that the glass was hard and he would not be able to break it. The truck was gradually approaching the turn at high speed. It could fall down into the abyss. The secretary was worried because her friend had not returned for a long time. She decided that the guy was in trouble. The main character did not have time to break the glass. He realized that he had very little time. The truck was racing at full speed and approaching the side fence. The main character managed to break the side window and extended his hand to the steering wheel. Li Qing turned the steering wheel to the side with all his might to save the car from falling. The people in the back were very scared. They were thrown to the side on the turn. The secretary was very worried. She didn't understand what was happening. The truck was moving at full speed and was carried to the side. It was heading up the mountain. The protagonist realized that the turn was very sharp. He decided that they might not be able to escape in time. The truck's cabin drove up the mountain at full speed. A loud clanging sound was heard. The main character got scared. He realized that the truck trailer could turn over. A huge truck was swerving from side to side on the mountain highway. A loud clanking sound could be heard. The car skidded on a turn. The body hit the mountain at high speed. The people inside the truck were very scared. They didn't understand what was happening. The main character said that everything was fine now. The car was saved thanks to the barrier. Police cars were arriving at the scene of the incident. They approached the truck. From the police car, an officer shouted for the truck to stop immediately. The guy was happy that the police had finally arrived. Police cars surrounded the truck. Security forces began to get out of the cars. Li Qin asked the police with displeasure, why did they only come now? The robbers had already escaped. The security forces approached the main character, handcuffed him, and arrested him. The main character asked the police in fear why they were arresting him. The man explained to the guy that he was a robber. The inspector came out. She looked angrily at the guy and said that it was him. The woman angrily told the guy that he robbed a bank the day after he left the police station. Li Qin was very scared. He shouted to the police that he was not a robber. The subordinate told the woman that they had found the hostage along with the robbers. There was also a pile of stolen money inside. The inspector told her subordinates to take the main character to the police station. The secretary was very scared when she saw her friend in handcuffs. The woman called out to the protagonist in fear. The inspector turned around in surprise and ran to her friend. She shouted to the police to free the guy. The secretary picked up the main character in her arms. She asked the guy if everything was okay with him, and yelled at the police that they had arrested the wrong man. She explained that the main character was a good guy, not a criminal. The secretary told the inspector with displeasure that she did not see the difference between good and evil. The woman demanded that the police release the guy. The main character was very weak. He couldn't stand on his feet. Anya was very scared. The policeman said that the guy was very badly hurt. She said in fear that the main character's legs were all bloody. The inspector strictly demanded that her subordinates carry the guy to the car. She decided to take him to the hospital. Leaking was lying in the ward. His body was bandaged. He felt the smell of antiseptic around the familiar. The main character realized that he was definitely in the hospital. He decided to open his eyes. The guy felt as if someone had placed a gentle hand on his face. The main character opened his eyes with great excitement. He did not know whose hand was in front of him. The boss asked her subordinate with concern if he was awake. The main character suddenly sat up in bed. The girl asked the guy if he was hungry. Li Qing answered, his interlocutor, that he was not hungry. Lin laughed contentedly to herself. The main character could not understand why his girlfriend was having fun. The girl headed towards the exit of the ward. She told the main character that she would go down and buy him something. Lin shouted to her friend that she would be back soon. The protagonist answered the girl that he would wait. The main character noted with surprise to himself that Miss Lin had suddenly become kinder. The boy looked out into the street. It was a bright day, Li Qing thought. That for some reason he felt uneasy. The girl came back and brought food in a bag. She wanted to help the guy eat. Lin began to blow hard into the spoon with food to cool it down for the guy. The girlfriend extended a spoon in her hand to the guy to feed him. The main character opened his mouth for a spoon with food. The girl asked her friend with interest what kind of expression he had on his face. Lin had his hands bandaged. He told the girl that he had to eat the food himself. The girlfriend looked at the main character with great excitement. She was still holding the spoon in her hand. The main character asked the girl in fear, "Did he really say something wrong?" Lin excitedly told the main character that his hands were injured. He couldn't move them. The guy also had a serious leg injury. The girl excitedly thanked the guy for protecting her along with An Qing. The main character said with a smile that everything was fine from the moment the police caught the criminals. Lin remembered the actions of the police. She was very unhappy with them. The girl told the main character that Captain Tan mistook him for a robber and arrested him. Lin told the guy that after the arrest he lost consciousness because he lost a lot of blood. The policewoman stood near the door. She watched the main character's conversation with the girl. The woman entered the guy's room. Li Qin and the girl noticed her. Lin turned around with displeasure and asked who it was that came to them. The girl greeted the policewoman. She asked how she could help her. The inspector said that she came to apologize to the main character. Lin angrily told the policewoman that because of her irresponsibility, the protagonist fainted from loss of blood. The main character told his girlfriend that he wanted to talk to Captain Tan. Li Xing explained that the policewoman had come to see him personally and therefore needed to be let in. Lin told the policewoman goodbye not to arrest the patient. The girl prepared to leave. The main character was left alone in the hospital department together with the policewoman. Tan turned to the guy. Li Qing told the policewoman that she could talk to him. The woman looked at the main character and asked him for forgiveness. The inspector looked down in front of her in silence. The protagonist did not answer the woman. Tan handed the guy a letter of apology that she had written to him. The woman asked the guy to read the letter. In it, she expressed her deepest regret for the incident. The protagonist turned to Captain Tan and asked her to sit down next to him. The woman thanked him. The policewoman sat down on a chair next to the bed. The main character lay and was silent. The woman asked the guy to read the letter right now. The main character replied that he would do so. The main character took a letter out of the envelope. He was interested in what the woman had written to him. The policewoman looked at the guy with concern. She realized that he was in very bad shape with his injured hands. Tan excitedly told the protagonist that she could read him the letter. The guy thanked the woman. The woman sat next to the protagonist's bed. She cleared her throat and prepared to read. The policewoman began to read the letter. The main character was very scared. Sitting on the bed, near the entrance to the ward, a nurse was watching everything closely. The woman continued reading the letter. The main character shouted at the policewoman to stop. Li Qing abruptly snatched the envelope from Tang's hands. He explained to the woman that he forgave her. The policewoman looked at the main character and said that he had a big heart. The main character turned on his side on the bed. He was unhappy. He didn't like that the woman was sitting next to him and didn't leave. After a long pause, Tan turned to the main character. The guy asked the woman, "Is she really not leaving?" The policewoman rolled up her sleeves. She said she wanted to massage the guy's leg. Tan threw back the blanket on the hospital bed with a very sharp and quick movement. The main character felt relief in his leg. He told the woman that he liked the massage. The policewoman continued to massage the boy's leg. The protagonist said that he did not feel any pain at all. Li Qing explained to the woman that he had not washed himself since he was hospitalized. Tan turned around and told the guy with a smile that he didn't stink at all. It was a bright day outside and the sun was shining. The main character was in the hospital building. The guy turned over on the bed. He decided to try to get up on his feet carefully and slowly. The policewoman shouted in fear to the main character that he should lie down and not get up. Li Qing looked calmly at the woman. He explained that he wanted to get up to go to the toilet. The policewoman bent down and started looking for something under the hospital bed for the guy. The woman found and handed the vessel to the protagonist. She said that it was a urinal for him. Tan stood next to the surprised guy with the vessel. She told Li Qing to take it. The main character decided to get back on his feet. He told the woman that for him it was just a need. Li Qing explained that a real man could not endure such a test. The policewoman suddenly ran up to the guy and shouted at him to stop. Tan told the guy with excitement that she completely trusted his determination. She reminded him that the patient must follow the doctor's orders. The woman explained to the protagonist that she took the whole day off to take care of him. The policewoman covered the confused guy with a blanket and told him to lie down. The woman held up a convenient urinal in front of the patient. The main character was lying on the bed. At that time, the policewoman shoved the urinal under the blanket. The guy felt very constrained. Tan continued to hold her hands with the vessel under the blanket. The main character excitedly told the woman that he would do the rest himself. Tan told the main character that he can't move his arms, so he needs outside help. The policewoman told the guy with great concern that he was not allowed to move his hands. Li Qing asked the captain discontentedly, what was she doing to him under the blanket? He wanted to do everything himself. The nurse stood near the door of the ward and silently watched everything. The main character was in a hospital ward. There was a policewoman next to him. The woman held a urinal in her hands near the guy's feet. She said he could start. Tan asked the main character with great excitement if he by any chance suffered from prostatitis. The main character very angrily answered the woman that everything was fine with him. Li Qing very realistically imagined that somewhere in the jungle there was water flowing. The main character was lying on the bed. He was very embarrassed. He needed to do something to hide it. Li Qing began to hum a song about summer to himself. The woman next to him was very surprised. To completely distract himself, the main character turned his head to the side and sang a cheerful song. The policewoman decided to support the patient. She started singing with him. The main character was unhappy and irritated. He wanted the woman next to him to sing a different song. It was a bright summer day outside. A bird was sitting and singing on one of the trees. The door opened. The main character's girlfriend entered the room. "Hua," she greeted him. The guy lay on his side on the bed, dissatisfied and silent. The policewoman greeted the girl. The main character stood up on the bed. He happily told the woman that she could leave first. Li Qing explained to the policewoman that his friend Hua would take care of him. The girl promised the policewoman that she would take good care of the guy. Tan waved her hand to the main character and said goodbye. She stood in the doorway and promised the guy to come back and visit him. Li Qing was very unhappy. He decided that he needed to change hospitals. The girl took out a box of food and put it on the table. She told the guy that he looked terrible. Hua opened the lid of the vessel. She explained to the protagonist that she had cooked porridge for him. The main character stayed with his girlfriend in a ward in the hospital building. The girl fed her friend with a spoon. The main character consumed the food while sitting. Hua reached into her bag. She told the guy that she had brought something for him. The girl took a stuffed toy man out of her bag. She told the protagonist that she had brought the figurine for him. The main character silently looked at the gift. The girl told the guy that the doll looked very much like him. Hua headed towards the exit. She told the protagonist that she would return home to get him some clothes. Li Qing put the toy next to his pillow. He turned over to his other side to fall asleep. After a long pause, the main character turned around and began to look at the doll. The boy didn't want the toy near him. He threw it on the floor. The toy man remained lying on the floor near the bed. The main character turned around and tried to fall asleep. A few days later, a secretary came to the hospital building. She wanted to find the main character. Anne asked the nurse how to get to room 307. The interlocutor told the guest that she needed to go straight ahead and then to the right. The secretary thanked the nurse. She decided to visit the main character. The nurse watched the woman leave. She decided that the visitor was very cool and elegant. Anne approached the necessary chamber. She decided that the main character should be inside. The secretary came inside the room and asked if Ching was there. There were a bunch of guys sitting in the room. They looked at the woman in surprise. One of the guys looked at the woman angrily and said that she was his type. She calmly told her interlocutors that she was in the wrong room. The main character was lying on his bed in his room. He heard noise and screams outside. Li Qing heard the footsteps of many people in the corridor through his sleep with displeasure. A group of guys approached the secretary and started to harass her. One of them demanded the woman's phone number. The main character angrily asked from his room what kind of pigs were making noise in the corridor. The secretary became agitated. She listened and realized that she was hearing Li Qing's voice. Li Qing thought that the patients in the next room were very noisy. They were just transferred to the hospital yesterday. At this time, one of the strangers kicked down the door to the main character's room. The patient asked the woman in surprise, "Is her boyfriend really in the room?" The stranger looked at the main character with surprise. Li Qing sat silently on the bed. The guy was surprised. The main character seemed like an insignificant weakling to him. Jun Shu decided that the main character looked like a useless and spineless guy. The secretary came into the guy's room. She said that she came to visit him. The woman sat down next to the guy on the bed. She said that the hooligans were harassing her. Jun was very unhappy. He couldn't understand why such a cute girl was sitting with such a guy. The main character angrily shouted at the stranger that he was the secretary's boyfriend. Suddenly, the bully approached the main character and put his hand on his shoulder. Jun asked the guy to give him the woman. He said that he would pay him well. She angrily asked the stranger, did he really think that everything could be bought with money? The main character looked at his interlocutor and said that he would give the secretary to him. Li Qing extended his hand to the stranger and happily told him that he needed cash. Jun thought with pleasure that his interlocutor was a very simple person. The stranger calmly asked the main character how much money he wanted. Li Qing stretched out his hand in front of him. He said that he wanted 5 million in cash. Jun looked at the guy with great distrust. He was surprised by the amount of 5 million. Suddenly, the guy turned around and cheerfully answered the main character that he agreed to his proposal. The hooligan ran happily to the front door. He said that he would go to the bank and withdraw money. Jun happily shouted to the woman to wait for him and that he would return soon. The secretary realized that the main character did all this on purpose. She decided that Li Qing wanted to teach the bully a lesson. The protagonist told An Qing in a concentrated voice that they had little time. Li Qing asked the woman to help him pack his things. They needed to move to another hospital before the guy came back. The secretary looked at the main character silently. Li Qing shouted to the woman that the bank was very close and they needed to hurry. The joyful Jun ran into the bank building to quickly cash out the money. The guy was carrying a suitcase with money in his hands. The employee bowed to the client and said that their bank was very happy to serve him. At this time, someone suddenly came up behind Jun and put his hand on his shoulder. Tan told the guy to stop. She explained that he was suspected of human trafficking. She told Jun to go through the area with them. The secretary was pushing the main character in a wheelchair along the hospital corridor. Anne told her friend that she had found a hospital for him so that he could hide in a more discreet room. The protagonist thanked the woman. The secretary stopped and asked the guy who he really was. Li Qing told the woman that he was just an employee of her company. Anne looked sternly at her friend and said that she was not talking about that. The protagonist calmly replied to the woman that he was just Li Qing. The woman wheeled the boy in a stroller to the door. She said they had arrived. Anne thanked the main character for saving her. The guy answered the woman that she shouldn't thank him. He got her into trouble himself. The main character told the woman, with a smile, that it was normal for her to find herself in such a situation. The secretary looked at the main character with concern. She didn't know what to tell him, and headed for the exit. She told the guy that she would not bother him anymore. The main character waved his hand to his girlfriend with a smile and said goodbye to her. The secretary left the room very agitated. She did not understand why her heart was beating so fast. Anne remembered that ever since the protagonist saved her, she couldn't stop the feelings in her heart. The woman noticed to herself that she saw the image of the main character everywhere, and felt that Li Qing's face was imprinted in her heart. She decided that it was love. The woman said to herself quite contentedly that she had previously thought that she would never be in love. The protagonist thought to himself that he should not interfere with manager An Qing. The main character was discharged from the hospital after treatment. He decided to return to his job. Li Xing came to the office with a bag. He shouted with a smile to his girlfriend that he was back. Hua told the guy excitedly that it was too early for him to be discharged from the hospital. The main character said that the doctor told him about his imminent recovery. The girl told the guy that he would rest for a couple of days and then start working. The main character was walking around the city among the shops. He heard some interesting music. Li Qing stood on the street with a bag on his shoulder. He became interested in the song he heard. Li Qing stood near the entrance of the store, listening attentively to the music coming from there. The guy walked into the store. The salesman asked the customer with interest, "What does he want to drink?" The main character asked who was performing the song he had just heard. The manager told the customer with a smile that he had very good taste. The seller explained to the guy that the original song was very valuable. He put the disc on the counter. The main character looked closely at the image of the disc. There was a photograph of a girl on it. The seller explained that the client saw in front of him a disc of the popular Chinese singer Mu Zhou. The manager told the main character that he was holding the singer's debut album in his hands. The salesman across the counter told the main character that he was very serious. Li Qing asked the manager very seriously to sell him the album. The seller told the main character that he didn't want to sell the disc. This record was his favorite. The main character handed the manager a card and said that he wanted to buy a disc for 200,000. The manager was very surprised. He realized that he was seeing a black bank card in front of him. The seller said to the main character with displeasure that he was very stingy. The client had a black card and he offered only 200,000 for the disc. Li Qing asked his interlocutor with excitement, "How much does he want for the music album?" The manager became engrossed in calculations. He remembered that he had spent 500,000 on buying the disc. The seller told the main character that he was ready to give him the music recording for 5 million. Li Qing told the manager with displeasure that 5 million for a disc would be too much. The seller told the customer that if he didn't like the price, he could leave. The main character left the store. He was unhappy. The guy decided that reality would no longer be on his side. Li Qing realized that even if he hadn't bought the album, he would still be more depressed. A car pulled up behind the guy. Manager An Qing was driving. The woman told the protagonist that she would bring him to the office at Miss Lin's request. The main character asked if Lin really wanted him to return to work. Anne reported that her boss did not go into details. She told the guy that he needed to go. Li Qing asked the woman to give him a ride home first. He needed to take the food he bought home. The main character, accompanied by the manager, arrived by car to the company building. The woman told the guy to go to Lin's office. She still had some things to do herself and she needed to go. Li Qing entered the elevator and went up to the desired floor. He decided to go straight to his boss. The main character noticed a whole group of men in black suits standing near the entrance to Lin's office. Li Qing approached the stranger and said that he needed to pass them. The protagonist couldn't understand why there were so many people surrounding Miss Lin's office. The guy came closer to the door and told the woman that he had already arrived. Suddenly, someone from the side grabbed the main character by the hand and did not let him open the door. The stranger told the guy that he had to stand in line for an interview. Li Qing replied to the stranger that he had not come to the interview. He was working here. The woman from inside the office addressed the protagonist. She said that he could come in. The main character entered the office of his boss. There were two unfamiliar men standing around the woman. Lin apologized to the guy for calling him when he was on vacation. Lin told the protagonist that she first wanted to introduce him to her friends. The girl said that Uncle Long Wu was standing next to her. He was her father's main bodyguard, and now he would protect her. Lin said that Uncle Long's son named Long Ji was standing next to her. The protagonist recognized the bodyguard. He had caught him with a girl at her house before. Lin told everyone present that they could now head to the gym. The main character and his companions arrived at the gym. There were many different exercise machines there. The girl asked Lin to help her choose some new bodyguards. She might get into danger. The main character thought to himself that he would not agree to become Lin's bodyguard. Lin told her companions that they had no time to waste. The interview was about to begin. The girl sat at the table with her companions. Lin told the interviewees to each introduce themselves according to the numbering. A guy named Hu San said that he studied martial arts for 10 years. He also won the national championship. The uncle looked at the applicant attentively. He turned to his son, who was sitting next to him. The guy came to the market. He decided to fight with the interview participant. Lon stood in one corner. Opposite him was his opponent. They prepared for the fight. Hugh swung his arms. He decided to nail his opponent from above. Lon swung his arm and hit his opponent in the face with all his might. Uncle Wu said in a dissatisfied voice for the next participant to come forward. A guy came up to the table with a bouquet of flowers in his hands. He told the girl to marry him. The guy Lon got angry. He told the suitor that he shouldn't propose anything to the girl before him. Lon grabbed the stranger and pulled him aside. The guy continued to shout at the girl that he loved her. Another contender came in. He started singing a song for the girl into the microphone. The guy continued to passionately sing to the girl that he would always love her. Lon slammed his hand on the table in displeasure. He shouted at the challenger to have no emotion in his song. Lon said to his interlocutor with displeasure that he should perform at Eurovision. Uncle Wu sternly ordered the next applicant to come to them. The girl was very happy. She said that every candidate for bodyguards has many talents. A guy named Hao Yan came in. He said that he had been working as a bodyguard for 3 years. He said that he could prove his strength. The girl was delighted. She said with a smile that this applicant looked quite decent. Uncle View told the guy that if he wants to show his strength, then let him get into the ring. There was a who in the market, and opposite him was a long. Uncle Wu told the participants that they could begin. The challenger calmly told his opponent that he could hit him first. Lon got very angry. He didn't like that his rival had such a cheeky character. The fighter stood up and angrily told his opponent that he would knock out all of his teeth. Lon waved his hands. He wanted to defeat his opponent as quickly as possible. Hao was able to block the guy who attacked him with a very light and quick blow. The challenger suddenly and quickly moved his hand to the side and grabbed her hand by the pubis. Huo decided to start the attack. He pushed off sharply from his place to strike. The candidate, with a sharp movement of his elbow, hit his opponent on the head with all his might. Uncle Wu jumped to his feet. He was very surprised by his son's defeat. The uncle realized that his son had lost. It came as a surprise to him. The candidate stood and calmly looked at his opponent lying in the ring in front of him. Hugh said in a calm voice that the guy Luo was very weak for him. The girl called the medics for the womb. Uncle Wu angrily told the guy that he was very cruel to his rival. The candidate calmly explained to the man that during the fight, he had to show him his strength. Hugh said to the man with a smile that in a real fight, there is no place for pity. The guy turned to the side. He noticed that the main character was sleeping peacefully on the table. Lin told the candidate with displeasure that he had been very cruel during the actual fight. Lon calmly explained to the girl that if he had not hit the guy back, he would have lost his teeth. The girl asked her uncle his opinion about the candidate. The man replied that Huo had good strength. Lin asked the man if the candidate had definitely passed the interview. The man looked at the sleeping protagonist. He reminded the girl that she wanted to hire Li Qin as her bodyguard. The uncle pointed his finger at the sleeping protagonist and told him to fight the Hu. The man told the challenger that if he won the fight, he would become the head of the bodyguards after him. The boy smiled at Uncle Wu and said that he would be happy to please him. The girl came up to the table and hit it with her hand as hard as she could. She shouted for the guy to wake up. The main character opened his eyes. He was sleepy and did not understand what was happening around him. Lin sternly told her subordinate that there was work for him now. The girl explained to the main character that he would now have a fight against Hu. The candidate was surprised that he would now be fighting against an ordinary repairman. The main character confirmed in a calm voice that he was an ordinary repairman. The girl told the main character with excitement that if he helps her find a good person like him, she will no longer ask him to be her keeper. The main character smiled at the girl and said that he would do everything possible for her. Hao thought about it. He decided that even an ordinary working guy could be very strong. The protagonist angrily told his rival that he would not be lenient with him. Li Qin swung his leg to knock his opponent down immediately. Hao managed to dodge the dangerous blow with a very quick and dexterous movement. Huo touched his face after he dodged the punch. The candidate very displeasedly and angrily told the protagonist that he had scratched his face. Huo rushed at the main character and shouted that he would now beat him to death. The guy scratched the main character's face with a powerful blow of his hand. He tilted his head to the side. Bao grabbed the protagonist's shoulder with a powerful blow of his hand and scratched it. Li Qin grabbed his opponent by the hand and tried to break his finger. Huo picked up speed and tried to hit his opponent with his hand with all his might. The main character managed to block a dangerous kick from his opponent. The candidate was tired. He stood and breathed deeply. He was unable to hit the protagonist right away. The girl said to the man, "Li Qing is losing." Uncle Wu thought about the answer. The man told the girl that the main character was able to block all of his opponent's blows. The girl watched attentively as the main character fought against the candidate. Lin could not understand why Li Qing only defended himself but did not hit his opponent back. The man told the girl that a fighter loses a lot of energy during an attack. Uncle Wu explained that the protagonist was waiting for the right moment to counterattack. Li Qing is waiting for the right time to take advantage of the opportunity to retaliate. The main character swung his hand sharply and hit his opponent in the chest with all his might. Hugh became scared and worried. He realized that he had taken a very strong blow. The main character swung with all his might to hit his opponent again. The candidate was able to move to the side in time to avoid a dangerous blow. Hugh noticed the protagonist leaning to the side. He prepared to hit him. The candidate swung his arm with all his might and hit his opponent on the head with his hand. Li Qing fell to the floor after a powerful blow. He was unable to get up again. Hugh stood and calmly looked at the main character lying in front of him. He was silent. The girl and the man also stood and silently looked at the lying Li Qing. Hugh said very displeasedly to his opponent to get to his feet. The candidate said angrily that he had won, and now the bodyguard's position was his. The girl remained silent in response. After a short pause, the man asked Lin what she thought about all this. Hugh was unhappy because his employers did not want to keep their promises. The girl told the candidate that they keep their promises. From now on, he will be the head of the bodyguards. The main character came to his senses. He couldn't believe that some guy could knock him out. The people around the main character looked at him with great surprise and in silence. But Li Qing was walking down the corridor. At that time, Huo caught up with him. He wanted to tell him something. Huo ran up to the main character from behind and told him to wait for him. The fighter thanked his interlocutor for allowing him to take the place of the leader. Li Qing told the fighter that there was no need to thank him. He didn't want to be involved in this. The protagonist waved goodbye to his interlocutor. He demanded that Huo protect the girl Lin. Huo looked after the main character with a long and hateful gaze as he left. He was silent. Li Qing pressed the elevator button. He needed to go down the building. The main character noticed a manager named Lu in the elevator. The girl was very surprised. The manager didn't understand why the guy still stayed in the company. She had previously told him to leave. The main character explained to his interlocutor that he just doesn't want to leave now. The girl looked at the main character with great attention. She wanted to say something. Liu walked up to the guy from behind and touched him on the back with her finger. The girl asked the main character, "Does he really not want to say anything else?" Li Qing explained to his interlocutor that he could not talk about anything, since he knew nothing. Suddenly, the light on the ceiling inside the elevator started to flash. People looked up. The light bulb on the ceiling began to dim. Everything around was plunged into darkness. The elevator cabin stopped. The girl looked ahead in fear. At the control panel, an employee spilled a drink on the keyboard. He asked his colleague Zhang for a rag to wipe it up. A colleague told the man to be careful. He explained that water had flooded the elevator control panel, which could break. The worker said that the fourth elevator was broken. He added that repairmen needed to be sent to sort it out. The main character told the frightened girl Lu that they would soon be pulled out of the elevator. The girl was very scared. She reassured herself that everything would be fine. The manager took deep, regular breaths to calm the anxiety within her. Li Qing couldn't understand why the girl was so quiet. He approached her. The main character grabbed the manager with his hands. He realized that the girl was unconscious. The repairman opened the elevator door. He asked the people if everything was okay with them. The main character shouted at the guy to call the doctor. Li Qing explained to the repairman that the girl had fainted and was not breathing. The manager was lying unconscious on the elevator floor. The protagonist was pressing his hands on her chest. Li Qing began to give the girl artificial respiration to bring her back to her senses. The main character became worried. He realized that his methods did not work for the girl. Suddenly, the manager came to her senses. She began to cough and breathe deeply. Liu looked at the main character and said that he would be the only one who would die. The manager thanked the main character for kissing her and saving her. Anya was eavesdropping on the side at this time. The woman listened attentively to the main character together with his interlocutor. She remembered about the kiss. Anne was unhappy. She didn't like that Liu took advantage of the guy. The girl handed the main character some paper. She said that she wanted to thank him. Liu explained that their company would be holding a lingerie show. She wanted to give the guy a ticket to the show. The main character was very happy and excited. He wanted to go to the show. Li Qing thanked the girl. Liu reminded the guy not to forget her kindness. and became worried. She realized that there would be many beautiful girls at the lingerie show. She was afraid that the girls might seduce the main character. Anne came to the main character's office, where he was sitting with the rest of the workers. Li Qing looked at the woman who came with great surprise. They were silent. The main character asked his interlocutor what she had just told him. Anne asked the guy if he was free to have dinner with her in the evening. The woman told the protagonist that they would meet downstairs after work. Li Qing agreed. Anne headed towards the exit and said goodbye. The main character said goodbye to her in return. The worker was very surprised. He asked the main character, "What just happened?" Li Qing replied that he himself did not know what happened. The repairman called Anya a demon and said that she invited the main character to dinner. Li Qing asked his colleagues how scary this woman could be. The main character met his colleague in a restaurant in the evening. They sat down at a table. Li Qing sat opposite the woman. He asked what she wanted to tell him, and asked the guy with interest if he felt that something was happening to him lately. The main character honestly answered the woman that he had not been very lucky lately, and seriously told her interlocutor that something bad could happen to him very soon. The main character became worried. He asked the woman, "Is she really a fortune teller?" Anne slammed her hand on the table with all her might. She said that she could do more than a fortune teller. The woman demanded that the protagonist give her his right hand. Anne began to study the guy's hand with great attention. She looked at its various lines. The woman told the guy in a serious voice that he would be heading to the southeast next week. The main character was amazed. He asked his interlocutor, how could she predict such a thing? And sternly informed the guy that she had already met a person in a similar situation and had given him some advice. The woman was telling a story about one of her friends who didn't believe her. Anne asked the main character to guess what happened to her friend. Li Qing was very scared. He asked the woman what happened to her friend. Anne said that when her friend approached the bus, it broke down and cut off his legs. The main character was very scared. He didn't know what to do in such a situation. The woman told the boy not to go to the southeast next week. Li Qing should only go to work and home. The main character smiled at his interlocutor. He thanked her for her advice. He promised that he would not go anywhere next week. The woman waved to the guy and said goodbye to him. Li Qing waved back. The protagonist looked at the invitation card. He realized that he could not refuse the trip to the southeast. Li Qing looked at the girl's photo. He decided that he would definitely go to the lingerie show. A few days later, the woman came to the company building. She was looking for the main character. Anne asked the workers excitedly, where had Qin gone? The workers told the woman that the main character took the day off and went to the city for a show. The woman realized that the main character had deceived her. He still went to the city. In the office building, near the pool, female workers were sitting and talking to each other. Lin asked the girl if she had given the ticket to the main character. Liu replied that she had. The boss said that if the main character comes, nothing bad will happen. Uncle Wu asked the girl, is she sure that Li Qing can ensure the safety of the show? The man reminded the girl that the main character was unfaithful to her. He suggested that she give up the guy. Lin said that the main character is a very talented person and she does not want to lose him. She explained that the show will be an important step for their company. The girl demanded that Uncle Wu take care of her father. The man promised that he would find several reliable bodyguards. The main character was in his office. The employee was talking to a man who had come in. The man really wanted to buy something from Hua. She answered him that she would not sell him anything. The main character told the girl that he would go to the city by train. Hua looked at him excitedly. The girl looked at her friend and wished him good luck as she said goodbye. The main character asked the girl who the client was standing next to her was. The interlocutor told the guy that he could go to the show. The weather outside was bright. The main character was very happy to meet beautiful girls. Li Qing walked happily in slippers along the corridor. He was alone and there was no one else next to him. The main character said very cheerfully that he was going to see the beautiful models now. Li Qing laughed happily at something. A dissatisfied woman passed by him. A girl came up to the main character from behind. She was surprised that he actually came. The guy was surprised after he saw his girlfriend. Lu told her interlocutor that he should do everything backstage today so that everything goes according to plan. The main character was not happy. He said that he wanted to enjoy the show to the fullest. Lu smiled at the guy and said that he was naive and didn't understand anything at all. The girl asked the main character if he knew where the models would be before they went on stage. Liu told her interlocutor that if he followed her, all his dreams would come true. The main character demanded that his girlfriend take him backstage with her. Li Qing came to the utility room. There, various craftsmen were preparing decorations. The main character was unpleasantly surprised. He did not believe that he was behind the scenes. The worker turned around with displeasure. He looked at the people who had arrived with an angry gaze. The man said that he was very hot. He decided to take off his outerwear. The main character asked his girlfriend very irritably, "Where did the beauties go?" Leo explained to the guy that the workers were doing renovations and that the show would take place in a couple of days. The main character showed the girl a ticket and said that the show was supposed to take place today. Lou explained to the guy that she made the ticket especially for him so that he would come a few days earlier. The main character told the girl that he hated her because she played with his feelings. Liu told the guy that she hadn't played with his feelings at all. She explained that she was going to a party that evening and there would be models there. The girl promised the main character that she would take him to the party with her. Liu told the main character that she could get him the number of some beauty. Li Qing asked his interlocutor again if she was telling him the truth. The girl told the main character that she was telling him the truth, but there was one condition. The guy had to guard her for the next few days. The main character was delighted. He promised his interlocutor that he would be her protector. Liu grabbed her friend's hand and told the guy that she would take him to the hotel where she was staying. The main character and his girlfriend went outside. They headed towards the car. Liu and her boyfriend got into a white car and headed to the hotel. The girl told her friend that the car belonged to Miss Lin. She lent the car to her. The main character and his companion arrived at the hotel building. The guy looked around admiringly. Liu told her friend that Lin personally chose the room for her. The girl yawned and told the main character tiredly that she would go to bed. Li Qing was unhappy. He stayed alone in the room. The guy didn't like that he was a bodyguard again. It was deep night. The main character decided to fall asleep and rest as soon as possible. Li Qing was sleeping on his bed. Dreams began to appear in his mind. A red-haired girl appeared in a dream. She called the main character by name. The guy asked the stranger in fear who she was. The girl stood with her back to him. The red-haired stranger turned to the guy and asked if he remembered her. The main character recognized the girl who was in front of him. It was Zhou Er. The girlfriend excitedly told the guy that he looked like he had recently made a lot of friends. Zhou hugged the guy. She said that he has a golden heart that attracts many people. The girl reached out her hand and grabbed the guy by the chest to rip his heart out. The girlfriend showed the guy his heart in her hand. It was burning with a bright red fire. The girl threw the heart on the ground. It broke and shattered into many pieces. Zhou looked at her friend and asked him for forgiveness for not holding his heart. The main character felt that his soul was very heavy. At that moment, he suddenly woke up. Li Qing jumped out of bed very quickly. He wanted to forget his bad dream as soon as possible. The main character glanced at the clock next to the bed. It showed 5 o'clock in the morning. Li Qing was running along the track. He realized that he was dreaming more and more about the girl and could not forget her. The guy stopped after jogging. He was having a hard time catching his breath. The main character wanted to force himself to stop thinking about the girl. He told himself that he would never see her again. Li Qing sat on a bench. He dried himself with a towel and felt that his mood had improved after running. A little boy came up to the main character from the side. He asked for some money. The salesman behind the counter was unhappy with the arrival of the little boy. He shouted at him to stay away from him. The stranger told the man that he had not earned a penny. He explained that he would be beaten if he returned home. The main character looked at the boy. He said that he would buy him a bun. The stranger held out the dish to the protagonist and said plaintively that he didn't need a bun, but just some money. Li Qing took out a banknote and handed it to the boy. He decided to help him in this way. The seller told the main character that the little boy did not need food, even if he offered it. The boy approached other passers-by and asked for money. The man explained to the main character that the boy would not leave anyone alone until he got what he wanted. Li Qing told his interlocutor that he wanted to take the little boy to an orphanage. The man told Li Qing that it was all useless. The seller explained to the main character that the child would not follow him. At that moment, someone slipped the boy a large bill. The seller said that the boy's life could get worse if he returned here after the orphanage. Li Qing asked the seller with excitement, why could the child's life become worse? The seller explained to the main character that he had told him everything he wanted. He could not add anything more. Li Qing looked calmly at the man and explained to him that he was not scared at all. The seller answered the main character that he was not afraid at all, since he does business here every day. The main character was surprised. He did not understand why the seller looked so scared. To the side, in the bushes, a man was treating a little girl very roughly. The man grabbed the girl by the hands and angrily asked how she dared to run away from him. The little girl angrily screamed at the man that she was in pain and that he should let her go. The offender shouted at the girl that if she screamed again, he would strangle her. A passerby came up and gave a small bill to the boy. She felt sorry for the poor children. The man told his interlocutor that they had earned a lot today thanks to the two children. He continued to give them more food today. The guy explained that if the children go hungry, they will be able to bring in even more money. The men approached the children on the edge of the park. There were no strangers there. The guy demanded that the children give him all the money they had earned today. The child handed over a small amount of money. The man was very unhappy. He didn't like that the child didn't collect enough money. The guy swung his leg with all his might and hit the child with all his might. The boy started crying. The man told his accomplice not to hit the child because he was still little. The guy said thoughtfully to his colleague that in such work they must be ruthless. Li King stood near the wall and listened attentively to everything. The man told his accomplices that they were returning and would return in the evening. Men in a white car transported a group of children to a country house. The guy opened the car door. He commanded the children to get out. The man noticed that the boy was lying on the chair and did not get up. He said that something had happened to Jia. The guy responded to his accomplice by saying that the boy was just pretending. The main character stood for a long time near the entrance to the house. After that, he decided to go inside and find the kidnappers of the children. Li Hing restrained himself in order to follow and find out where the kidnappers' lair was. But there were many turns near the houses and he lost the attackers. The main character couldn't tell the police yet. He still thought that the children had been kidnapped and were being held somewhere. The guy turned around and noticed the old woman. She was sitting on a chair near the entrance to the gate. The main character asked the woman if she knew a large family from this village. The old woman looked angrily at the main character and said that she knew nothing. Li Xing noticed a passerby and ran towards him. He wanted to ask him something. The main character did not understand why the people in this village were so cold. The woman poured the prepared food into the children's plate. They were sitting at the table. The woman was stirring food in a saucepan. She said angrily that she sits at home all the time and cooks. She doesn't even have time for a boyfriend. The children began to eat the food with gusto. The boy said that he was very hungry. The child at the table extended a bowl of food towards the disabled man Guan. The boy thanked him. The girl was sitting and having dinner in a restaurant. She said that the steak was very tasty for her. Liu looked to the side and asked her interlocutor, "Where is the main character?" The boy felt very ill after eating. He vomited right on the ground. The woman was unhappy. She didn't like that the children were sick after her food. The children curled up and lay on the ground. One of them said that his stomach hurt very badly. The woman approached the man and said that one of the children looked sick. The owner said that the boy was very sick. She added that the man should go and look at the child himself. The man told the woman to go and have some fun after she finished cooking. The woman thought about whether to tell the old woman about the sick boy. She decided that the child would not die. The old woman angrily asked the woman what she had just told her. The mother looked very sternly at her interlocutor and asked, "What happened to her?" The woman said with a smile that one boy had an upset stomach. The main character walked around the village. He looked around carefully and could not find the people he needed. The old woman looked ahead with anger and displeasure. She decided to look at the children herself. The woman approached the children in the cage. She asked one of them what had happened. The child said in a frightened voice that the boy Jie was not well and that he was probably dying. The man was sitting at the table having lunch. He said to the woman with displeasure that he was not a doctor and there was no need to ask him about anything. The man told his mother discontentedly that she should stay at home and not think about business. The old woman said angrily that if the child died, it would be murder. The man replied to his interlocutor that no one would know if the children died. The children sat near the sick child. One of them said that Jia's stomach was swollen. The boy was lying on the floor and couldn't get up. He looked very sick. The guy told his friends that this couldn't go on. They needed to come up with an escape plan. It was a bright day outside. The children decided to get out of their cage and came up with a plan. The guard heard one of the children start calling loudly for help. He came over. The boy angrily shouted at the children that he would beat them if they screamed. One of the boys said that their friend Jaya was not breathing. The guard grabbed the keys. He said that he would come in now and have a look at everything. An old woman came up to the main character from the side. She told the guy to wait. Li Ting turned to the woman and asked what she wanted to tell him. When the guard entered the cage, one of the children hit him on the head with a bucket as hard as he could. The guy happily told the kids that they gave the guard a good beating. The guy came to his senses. His head was covered in blood. He felt severe pain. The kids ran away with the older guy. The guard angrily shouted at them that he would kill them all. A group of kids ran up to the front door. They opened it and wanted to hide. A group of children noticed that there was another guard standing near the door. They were unable to go any further. The old woman asked the main character if he was looking for poor children. She told the guy that she knew where the children were. It was a bright day outside. The sun was shining high in the sky. The fighter came to his senses and wanted to find the runaway children as soon as possible. The guard shouted to the young man that he should catch the little fugitives as quickly as possible. The boy told the children to get back to the cage as soon as possible. The older brother would come back and beat them to death. The guards caught all the escaped children and brought them back to the cage. The guard grabbed his head. He said that it hurt. The guy said that his interlocutor could beat him personally if he wanted. The fighter reached out his hand to the stick on the floor. He decided to beat up one of the escaped guys. The guard with a stick in his hand shouted at the guy that he was going to teach him a lesson now. At this time, the man kicked the door open. After that, he went inside. The man said that the boys were making too much noise. He didn't like that the guards couldn't look after the children. At this time, the main character was climbing the fence. He wanted to come and help the children. The main character jumped off the fence. He realized that he had found the place his grandmother had spoken about. He had already managed to call the police. Li Qin looked around. The courtyard was huge and there were tall houses. The guards continued to beat the boy. The little boy shouted at the fighters to stop. The guard continued to beat the guy on the back with a large whip. The guy told the guard that he needed to stop. If he continued, they would be in trouble. A police car drove up to the building and stopped near the fence. The policeman was unhappy. He couldn't drive further to the house. He hoped that it wasn't a false call after all. The man came up to the woman and asked how he could get to block 1004. The old woman told the policeman in detail how he needed to get to the right place. The man was surprised that he would need to climb over the wall. The policeman thanked the woman. The old woman silently stepped aside. The man climbed over the wall and jumped to the ground. He heard a scream from the side. The policeman reached for his gun. He realized that something had really happened. The man kicked the door down with all his might. He was very determined. The policeman pointed his gun in front of him. He shouted at the people to raise their hands. The man saw the bodies of several beaten guards in front of him. The main character was standing nearby. The policeman noticed that the protagonist's hands were completely covered in blood. The beaten guy was lying on the floor. He extended his hand to the policeman and asked for help. The main character angrily turned to the side and silently looked at the man who had arrived. The fighter ran to his boss Chow and said that they had big problems. The boss was sitting in his room with the girl. He was listening attentively to his subordinate. The fighter said that someone had discovered their base. The boss listened attentively. The leader asked his subordinate in displeasure and detail, "What happened?" The fighter said that a man named Li Qing came to them. He is not sure if other gangs could have done this. The subordinate said that Dinzi and his 2 men were wounded. The main character also brought police officers. The boss told his subordinate to sort everything out. He added that Dinzi shouldn't involve them. The phone rang on the desk of the bureau chief. He decided to answer it. The boss went to the window and picked up the phone. He listened attentively to his interlocutor. The guy on the phone asked his boss to do him a favor. The manager listened attentively to the request regarding the main character. He said that he would do everything. The guy told Chief Juan that as a token of gratitude, he would forget the dead. The main character was in the police building. He was being interrogated by one of the officers. The policeman asked the main character with interest why he beat the man. Li Ting told the security officer that he wanted to beat the man to death, but he held him back. The policeman told the protagonist that he should say that he was defending himself during self-defense. A policeman entered the room and told his colleague Chen that Chief Huang was looking for him. The policeman told his colleague that he would replace him. Chief Huang has an important task for Chen. Chen told his colleague Zhao that the protagonist is a good person and there is no need to be strict with him. The policeman sat down at the table and asked the main character why he beat the man. Li Qing calmly replied to his interlocutor that he had beaten the man in self-defense. The phone rang at the hotel where Lin was. It was her subordinate calling her. Liu told her boss in fear that the main character had been arrested. Lin asked the girl excitedly, what happened if the guy was arrested? The main character was being interrogated by a police officer in a separate cell. Zhao told the protagonist that he had broken into private property without permission and beaten up decent citizens. The policeman told the guy that he was guilty. The main character answered the security officer that he was in the same gang as the criminals. Zhao told the detainee that if he hit him, it could be considered an attempt to attack a police officer. Chen felt uneasy about his boss's suspicious request, but he went on the mission nonetheless. Meanwhile, Zhao hurried to take the young master to the cell. The main character was outraged and demanded that at least the handcuffs be removed from him. The policeman calmly closed the gate, thereby ignoring Li, after which he asked his cellmate to keep an eye on the new guy so that no problems would arise. Chen was at the police department at the time, where he met Tang, and the girl asked him what he was doing there. The guy replied that he had come on behalf of his boss and decided to meet her. The police captain said that her shift was ending soon and offered to have lunch with him. Chen began to remember the police academy, where Tang was quite stupid, but now she had suddenly grown to the rank of captain. She, in turn, was interested in why he was sent here on a business trip, which is what she asked. The disgruntled policeman replied that he himself didn't like it, but he had to put up with the antics of his superiors. At that moment, Qing was getting to know his cellmates, who asked him what crime he had been imprisoned for. Li stated that he had not committed any illegal actions and was not guilty of anything. The boy continued to ask him why, then he was placed here under severe punishment. The young man asked in surprise what he was talking about and what kind of severe punishment he was talking about. The prisoner said sadly that they had most likely made him a scapegoat. Tan and Chen continued their pleasant conversation in the cafe and talked about Li, who was able to find the bandits' lair on his own. The guy noted that they were extremely lucky to have such strong citizens. He added that when he arrived at the scene, he saw a rather ferocious Qing there. The girl suddenly became thoughtful because she knew one person with the same name. Meanwhile, Li began to have fun in prison. One of his cellmates called on the elder to beat up the young man, but he refused to do this. The indignant guy asked why he beat him up at the time. The prisoner replied that he provoked them. At that moment, they were signaled for lunch break and called to head to the canteen. The young master silently took his food and went to look for a free place. Suddenly, his new friends called out to him and invited him to their table. Qing calmly sat down next to them. The chief noted that it would be better for him to stick with them and not provoke anyone, so as not to get into trouble, and if he wants to survive, he needs to know the influential people here, with whom it is better not to have dealings. The first was Uncle Ban. He was 43 years old and hated ginger, and he was also missing part of his left eyebrow. The other one is the prickly Chang. He has a pet in the form of a lizard, and he is extremely good at fighting, since he is straight from the Shaolin Temple. The guy noted that if he did clash with them, he could survive, but under no circumstances should he touch the third madman. Everyone calls him the hellish ghost because he really did look like a demon. They say that he killed 30 people in a fight and even tore off the head of one of them. Then the guy leaned over and quietly said that he was actually mentally ill because his perversions could not be explained in any other way. At that moment, he approached them from behind and declared that he was absolutely healthy. The prisoner became frightened and asked him for forgiveness, after which he demonstratively began to eat his food. He stated that today's curry tasted disgusting and also smelled of something unknown. The ghost leaned over to toss him and wiped his dirty hand on his clothes. The boy did not resist him. The madman smiled and said that next time he would cut out his tongue without hesitation, after which he waved his hand, thus causing pieces of food to hit the main character's face and clothes. The hellish ghost began to pretend that he was very sorry that this had happened. The young master looked at him with his menacing gaze and said that he had better stay away from him. The prisoner was shocked by this statement and came closer to him. Then he demanded that he repeat what he had said, since he allegedly had poor hearing. The madman suddenly broke the spoon with a sharp movement, thereby turning it into a weapon with a sharp point on the end. After which he said that he could even cut someone's throat with this, but Li was not afraid. On the contrary, he knocked the broken spoon out of his hand and with a sharp blow slammed it into the table. King looked demonstratively at the hellish ghost, thereby hinting that he was not to be trifled with. The other cellmates, in turn, could not believe what had happened. After all, the young man was able to stick a spoon into an iron table. It was truly incredible. Even the ghost noted his strength and said that the boy turned out to be quite capable. He suddenly reached into his pocket as if he wanted to get a sharpening knife and declared that he admired capable people. He added that for the sake of his reputation, he would leave them for a short time and tapped Li on the shoulder. The madman turned around and said that he would look forward to the next meeting. He walked demonstratively around the corner with an overly self-confident gait. In fact, he really became scared because he had never met such strong people. It's good that he reacted in time and left, since it's unknown what the consequences would have been. His cellmates began to ask the guy how he was able to drive the spoon into the metal table. asking him to teach them this amazing technique, trying in every way to become his friend. Uncle Ban, in turn, approached the table to admire it and was surprised. The investigator and former teacher of Shin at the police academy realized that they were talking about the same person, which is what he hastened to tell her. However, Tan assumed that it was just a coincidence, but she herself thought again. Chen thought that she had become smart since she had solved the robbery, but this was not the case. He advised her to act as befits a leader. Finally, the girl admitted that it was Qing who helped her solve the robbery and asked her teacher to take care of him. But the policeman said that he would not be lenient with him and intended to deal with him seriously. At this time, Dinzi called Juan and asked if he had received a gift from him. The chief of the police department replied that everything was fine and thanked him, adding that this teenager will spend his entire life behind bars and there is no reason to worry. At that moment, the young master asked Mouse if it was possible to call from prison. The guy said that this could only be done once a month, but that permission had to be obtained first. The main character understood why the seller reacted that way, because the bandits had connections in the police. After some time, Chen returned to his office where he met Zhao. He thanked him for his help and asked where the young man who had been with them yesterday was. The policeman replied in a completely casual manner that Qing had written a statement and left. Meanwhile, Liu saw an unknown person in the office and asked who he was. Hao didn't expect such a huge company to hire a child. The manager literally went berserk and seemed ready to kill him for such an insult. Yan apologized to her and said he was just joking, then quickly introduced himself as the new head of security. He added that he was authorized to deal with various problems, after which he extended his hand to her, but she ignored the boor. At this time, the duty officer informed the prisoners that they could call their relatives, except for Li. The guy's outraged new friends asked why they couldn't call him. The policeman replied that this was an order from above and he had no right to violate it, especially since Qing had committed a terrible crime. Zhao headed to the boss's office, who began to praise the employee. The young man said that in the afternoon he would send the newcomer to a solitary confinement cell so that he would not be able to contact anyone. Huang noted that he was much more agile than Captain Chen and was able to think in the right direction. Hinting that he would soon appoint him captain, the boy thanked him for his understanding. The officer on duty, in turn, went to the cell and, opening the bars, ordered Li to come out. His cellmates were extremely surprised and assumed that someone had come for him. However, the employee noted that the guy would be transferred to a solitary confinement cell. The mouse asked why he was being transferred, since he had only arrived here yesterday. The policeman handcuffed Chin and replied that it was not his decision and he did not know what it was connected with. He said that solitary confinement was not so bad as there was a TV and books. The mouse still didn't calm down and said that in fact this teenager was not guilty of anything. The officer on duty was surprised and asked a counter question. Why then was an innocent man in prison? And if he really didn't do anything, then there's no need to worry because you just need to file an appeal. At that moment, the young master saw Yan's face in the photograph that Mouse was covering with his hand. Suddenly, the protagonist shouted his name and declared that he knew the man in the photo, but the guard hurried the young man out. So he was sent to enjoy solitude in another cell. Mouse wondered if he really knew his younger brother Hao. The guy looked at the photo again. Where they drank in one of the city bars, life was completely different then. After a certain time, Yan came to him in prison to visit his older brother. The warden said that they had no more than 15 minutes and Mouse entered the room. The joyful brothers were genuinely glad to see each other and began to ask about the life that each of them was living. But the elder still decided to ask the younger if he knew Qin. At this time, Chen tried to find out from Zhao where Li was going, saying that it was very serious. But the cunning investigator said the guy was determined and he was unable to stop him. He will also make every effort to find the teenager and assured him that there is no reason to worry. However, Chen was not as stupid as the boss said. He suddenly called out to Zhao, and he said that he couldn't be fooled. The policeman naturally wasn't afraid of the captain's threats. The young man said that he shouldn't get nervous, so as not to screw up and regret it later. And if he is so eager to finish the job, then he needs to work in a team to achieve results. Chen was well aware that Huang was involved, and Qing was clearly in danger. The investigator immediately went to the archives and asked to be given Li's file, which Zhao had handed over yesterday. The girl rummaged through the papers for a while, after which she gave him a folder with the necessary documents. Chen opened it instantly and immediately closed it nervously, realizing that he had been deceived once again. The employee did not understand what was going on, and the angry policeman headed for the exit. The young lady carefully folded the papers and wondered what had made him so angry. She decided to take a look at Chin's file and discovered that there were blank pages. Meanwhile, Ao was telling his older brother that Lee might indeed be guilty and that he shouldn't react like that. But Mouse called on Yan to look into this matter and find out what really happened and whether the guy was guilty. The younger brother naturally agreed to find out everything and promised him to conduct his own investigation in the near future. At this moment, Chen called Shin and said that Lee might be in danger, and he can't find him anywhere. Tan also suspected something was wrong but didn't know what to do. Hao, in turn, was wondering where he should start to rescue Qing, since he had recently helped him with his work. And he came to the conclusion that he first needed to visit the police, where he tried to charm an archive employee in order to get Lee's file. However, the young lady flatly refused to go to the restaurant with him and was unwavering in her decision. Chen didn't like the young man's persistence and hastened to reprimand him. The officer stated that if he did not intend to report any incident, it was time for him to leave. Hao replied that he was just chatting with a beautiful girl and did not want to offend anyone. The investigator noted that it would be better for him to go to the park and talk there, but Yan nevertheless discreetly handed the girl a piece of paper with his phone number. The archive employee was surprised herself, but quickly hid the piece of paper. At that moment, the guy said that it was really time for him to leave. Turning to the lady and smiling sweetly at her, he quietly said that he would wait for her call. And that same evening, they went to a cafe where they chatted and spent time carefree. Yan tried to get some information out of her and asked if anything unusual had happened at the station recently. The naive girl told him about the latest events, due to her knowledge. After which, they chatted a little more and said goodbye. Hao promised to call her when he had the opportunity. He understood that she knew too little, and therefore it was necessary to find out about Qin from Chen, who was handling Lee's case. Manager Liu was having lunch in the office at the time and wondered why her bodyguard Yan was not at work. Hao tracked down the investigator and hid in the bushes, trying to hear what he was talking about with the girl. Xin told Chen that she took a day off from work and no one knew where she was going. The officer warned that he was being watched and that he would have to rely on her, as he was limited in his actions. Suddenly, Tan heard some noise in the bushes and thought that there was someone there. She grabbed Yan with a lightning-fast movement and dragged him out of the bushes. The guy was in shock. He never thought that he would ever find himself in such a situation. For a moment, the teenager literally froze in place. Shin did not understand what had happened to him. Chen, in turn, assumed that he was simply very scared from the unexpectedness and asked Hao if everything was okay with him. The young man finally collected his thoughts and, shaking himself off, stood up on his feet, then continued their conversation about Lee. He stated that Qing was currently under arrest and heard that they intended to help him. The investigator was finally convinced that the boss and Zhao had deceived him, and the guy needed to be saved. Chen urged them to proceed with extreme caution, as their covert investigation could lead to big problems. Meanwhile, the young master sat in proud solitude in the cell and reflected on what was happening. The teenager assumed that Mouse asked his brother for help since he could not contact the outside world. Suddenly, Lee thought about escaping and said out loud that maybe he should really try to escape. Suddenly, a voice from behind the wall said that he would not be able to do this. The main character turned around and asked who it was. There was deathly silence in the cell. Then Uncle Ban said he wanted to talk to him, but he was transferred to solitary confinement and had to find a way to get close, adding that he had some very interesting information for him. It was late in the evening when Chen called Xin and Hu to go to the hospital the next day to find out from Ding and his wards, whom Lee dealt with, who is behind this and is the organizer. The next day, late at night, an unknown person entered the hospital, namely Shi's ward. He carefully removed the oxygen mask from him, and the boy continued to sleep peacefully. Suddenly, the stranger put a pillow on his face and began to suffocate him with it. After some time, Ding stopped kicking and completely lost consciousness. At this time, Xin and Ho approached the hospital. He said that this is where Shi should be, but getting inside will be difficult as police have sent out officers to keep watch, and Tan said she can handle them. Suddenly, a moment later, a stranger jumped out of the window of Ding's room and ran in an unknown direction. Yan ordered him to stop, but the man ignored his demand and rushed into the distance. The young man urged Xin to go to the hospital and look after Shi while he tried to catch up with the stranger. The stranger was fast enough that Hao really had a hard time catching up with him. On the way, the teenager saw a piece of wood and hurried to throw it at the running boy. However, the unknown person managed to dodge and continued running. At a certain point, Yan was able to close the distance and pounced on him. But it is worth noting that the guy was not one to be timid and fought back against Hao in every possible way. He suddenly grabbed his leg. At the same time, the young man easily escaped from the grip. It seemed that the advantage was still on the teenager's side, because in most moments the unknown person dodged the attacks, not having the opportunity to strike Yan, who quite skillfully swung his legs in front of his face. The stranger only backed away, trying to avoid a fight in every possible way, because he understood that one wrong move and the police would catch him. In connection with this, he again began to run away into the forest thicket. Hao tried to catch up with him, but this time the man was still able to hide since the forest was pitch dark and full of trees. When the teenager finally realized that he had missed his target, he hurried back to the hospital. However, when he entered the room, Yan did not find any of the police officers, and he was surprised. Sin, in turn, confirmed the death of Ding and his henchmen, those who were also in the hospital. There was only one left. The one who killed Shi meanwhile merged with the crowd on the street and went in search of him. Chen hurried to the station, where he again began to question Zhao about where he had hidden his last accomplice. The unperturbed young man stated that he had neither the time nor the desire to communicate with him in such a tone. Suddenly, the captain's phone rang, and he naturally rushed to answer. At this moment, Zhao sat down at his desk with complete calm and began filling out the report logs. But the restless Chen again interfered with him, leaning right on his magazine, after which he angrily told him that in fact Ding was already dead. The policeman literally grabbed him by the clothes and asked why he didn't send people to protect him. Hinting that he had done this on purpose, Zhao pushed him away and replied, "These people deserve to die." The officer looked into his insolent eyes and remained silent, restraining himself from rash actions. Then, heading towards the exit, he said that he was no different from those scoundrels. Late at night, the killer went to an abandoned house where Shi's last accomplice was located. Wrapped in a blanket, the boy was terribly afraid that he would soon be found and killed. After all, 3 days had already passed, and it was unknown how much longer he would have to hide. He began to recall the recent events with Zhao, who had come into his cell on that fateful day, after which he released him completely and urged him to run away as far as possible. However, freedom turned out to be torture, because he had no money, and he could not return home since they were already waiting for him there. At that moment, someone unexpectedly knocked on his front door. The guy was terribly scared and didn't know what to do. He understood that they had come for him. Chen asked Hao if he could see the attacker's face. Yan replied that it was too dark there and he could not clearly see the killer's face. The investigator noted that both witnesses were already dead and most likely the last one was already being hunted, so they were obliged to find him before the killer. However, in reality, the killer had already dealt with Ding's last henchman, after which he moved away from the bloody body and sprayed his hands with antiseptic. He noticed that the bottle was empty and hurried to leave the scene. The news has already reported the death of the leader of the Shi gang, which was involved in kidnapping children. Hao said sadly that it was his fault, because he was never able to catch the killer. Tan said they needed to find other evidence now rather than discuss what happened. Chen said that only Ding's mother was left, but she most likely would not help them. However, Shin was sure that they needed to go to her right now, and asked the captain where she lived. The guy flatly refused this idea and said that they could not go there, adding that he would go alone and they should look in one more place where they might be able to get some evidence. On the news, Chief Wan continued to comment on the current situation. Meanwhile, in prison, the young master was finally served his long-awaited lunch. But after biting into the bun, Qing felt some strange object inside. Li hurried to break it and found a paper bundle. He was surprised. Having taken out a small letter from Mouse, the guy began to read, where he told him that his brother Yan was already taking care of his business, and if he is really innocent, then his brother will definitely find a way to help him. At this point, Uncle Ban asked the teenager why he was smiling. The stunned young man asked a counter question about how he found out about this through the wall. The prisoner stated that he could even hear every breath and that he should not be underestimated. Li found himself thinking that he was not very happy to have such a neighbor and considered him crazy. Ban in turn ordered him to shut up because he could hear his thoughts. The literally shocked protagonist hid and quietly finished his lunch, after which the old man called him to sit closer to the wall so that he could demonstrate what he was capable of. The teenager didn't quite understand him correctly and began to say that he really wouldn't want that. The enraged uncle repeated his demand and clarified that he was not going to do anything terrible. Kang instantly leaned against the wall and continued to say that he would not do anything. Ban immediately spat on his palms, preparing to show off his ability. Then he warned Li that he would be starting soon and that he should also prepare. The self-confident youth believed that nothing could surprise him anymore and urged the old man on. A second later, the uncle delivered a crushing blow to the wall, and it seemed as if the entire prison shook. The stunned Ching, in turn, instantly flew to the end of the chamber. He hit the wall and fell to the floor, something the guy never expected from Ban. Juan, as always, came to have some fun after a hard day's work and asked if they had any new ones. The old man replied that thanks to his patronage, their business was flourishing, and they really had a new addition. After which he turned and shouted, thereby calling on the girls to come out and show themselves to the master. A few seconds later, two young ladies came out, but one of them was clearly of a masculine build with pumped-up muscles. The servant noted that these girls were specially intended for Juan. The chief took off his glasses and seemed to be speechless. The old man added that he took into account the gentleman's preferences and brought him bodybuilders, one of whom even took part in the championship. The girls, in turn, were not very happy with the presence of this person. The servant asked him if he liked the girls. Juan looked at them carefully, after which he happily declared that he liked them and wanted to take them both. Meanwhile, Chen came to see Ding's mother, who was in tears and had lost all meaning in life. She tried to drive the policeman away and said that she would not tell him anything. After all, no one looked after her son, and the woman began to blame him for the death of her offspring. And even out of grief, she began to curse them all, saying that they would die in terrible agony. The investigator listened to her silently and admitted his guilt, and besides, they never found the killer. But he still asked her to tell him about Xi's life since he could have known the killer personally. Juan was relaxing in the company of the dressed-up Tang and Hao and was overindulging in alcohol. She told Chen about it. Xin called and said that they had already given him something to drink, but the boss still didn't say anything. The investigator said that he also didn't really find out anything, since Ding practically never told his mother about his affairs. Juan, in turn, pestered Yan and asked what she wanted, a new handbag or some other expensive gift. The teenager, in a not very convincing female voice, noted that he was quite a rich man. In response, the chief of the police department only grinned maliciously, which only confirmed his assumptions. At this time, the young master tried to find out from Feng how he did it and asked him to teach him this technique. Ban agreed to help him master this skill, but on one condition. After all, there will always be someone stronger than him in the world, and you shouldn't think that with the help of this ability he will become omnipotent. Also, once he has mastered this technique, it should never be used for selfish purposes, and he will need to take someone as an apprentice so that the skill is not lost. And if he turns out to be capable, Feng promised to teach him everything he knows. Yan and Tang were finally able to achieve the desired result before Huang fell asleep. Xin, in turn, asked Hao if he had written everything down correctly. The teenager took out a voice recorder and said that he had recorded the entire conversation. It was even surprising that he had worked for so long, since it was so easy to extract the necessary information from him. Xin hurried Yan to leave here because they had already done the main thing and now they needed to help Li. Then they all started listening to audio recordings where Juan stated that he could solve all problems with money, and only a fool would not take bribes, otherwise how could he have been in charge for so long? Tan said that this evidence was enough to make his life hell. Chen said that they needed to be presented to the head of the Public Security Bureau to ensure that Huang did not escape. Hao, in turn, said that he had one person who could help them in this matter. Yin immediately began calling Miss Lin, who had learned the terrible news about Qin. Kyo asked why Li was sent to a maximum security prison. The girl immediately went to the head of the bureau. The old man assumed that she had decided to accept his son's offer after all. But the young lady said that she was there for a completely different reason and that she had urgent business. Ace gave him a dictaphone and asked him to listen to the audio recording. The old man, in turn, asked the girl what was so important there. Lin urged him to just listen, and he would understand everything himself. A few minutes later, the angry Mr. Ding reacted furiously. He asked who was speaking and where she got this recording from, declaring that he would personally deal with this scoundrel. Q replied that it was the voice of one of the leaders of his branch, namely Zhu. After a certain amount of time, Zhao stormed into Huang's office like a madman and announced that Mr. Ding had arrived. The police chief was shocked. The guy noticed that the head of the Public Security Bureau was already at the main gate. He assumed that such an unexpected visit was connected with their dirty deeds. But Zhu urged him to calm down and control himself, since perhaps Ding was here for another reason. However, they may even have to act in unpredictable ways. A moment later, the staff lined up in the corridor, led by a worried Juan. The head of the Public Security Bureau immediately appeared at the door with his delegation, his face extremely displeased. Zhu naturally began to grovel before him and asked why he had not warned him of his visit. Dean remained silent. The boss invited him to go into the office to discuss everything and asked what assignments he would have. The chief asked a counter question about why he had arrested Li and sent him to a maximum security prison. Zhu began to say that they detain someone every day and he could not remember such a name. An enraged Dean suddenly slammed the table and shouted that he shouldn't be fooling around because he has irrefutable evidence of his scams and various dirty deeds in his hands. But Juan began to claim that this was slander and that he had done nothing bad to anyone. The boss ordered him to tone it down, and if he really wasn't guilty, then there was nothing to worry about, adding that he had reported the situation to the disciplinary committee and that his house was already being searched. Zhu was in shock. Also, there is more than enough evidence to put him behind bars for many years. Meanwhile, in the maximum security prison, the door to Li's cell suddenly opened. The young master could not understand what they wanted from him late at night. Suddenly, the warden said that Qing could be free. The main character was extremely pleasantly surprised. The teenager had no idea that Hao had such connections and would actually get him out of prison. He was met by a joyful Lin, who announced that she had come to take him away from here. The young man, in turn, did not expect to see her in such a place and did not know what to say. The guy asked how she even knew that he was here. Q replied that it was thanks to Ho and his friends, because they tried so hard to pull him out. Unexpectedly, Li asked her to wait because he wanted to talk to his master. The girl was surprised. King told Ban that he was leaving, but would definitely return to visit him. Fang said that he should not forget to practice this skill. He clearly did not expect the boy to be released so soon. After which, the old man handed him a battered book and remarked that he would learn the rest from this treatise. The young master asked if he would simply give him such valuable material. Ban stated that he knew the contents of the book by heart, and therefore there was no point in him keeping it. However, Feng demanded that Qing keep his promise and find a disciple to whom he would pass on this incredible knowledge. The protagonist assured him that he would keep his word no matter what it cost him. A moment later, the main entrance was opened for him, and they repeated that he was free. The guy greedily gulped in some fresh air. Like a primitive man, he stepped hesitantly over the threshold and began to look around. The weather was fine outside. The sun literally blinded Li because the young man had not seen it for so long. Suddenly, Captain Tan called out to him, and the girl rushed into his arms. Sin said that she had finally managed to pull him out, and now he was completely free. Adding that this needed to be noted, a pleased Chen and Yan stood behind the girl. King looked at them and thanked them for their help, because if it weren't for them, he would have rotted in this prison. Tan was already impatient to throw a party at the hotel on this occasion, which she told everyone about. The extremely bizarre Jin grabbed the young man and dragged him along, and the puzzled Lin asked her to put the boy down on the ground. Hao offered to help Chen, but the investigator assured him that everything was fine. Ding, meanwhile, continued to press Zhu to find out who was behind all this and asked why he had imprisoned Qing. But the stubborn Huan insisted that it was entirely his own decision. Naturally, the head of the bureau did not believe him, because they did not even have any disagreements with this teenager. Then he repeated his question again. Zhu continued to insist that there was no customer and asked to stop this interrogation. At that moment, his henchman came to Chuo and told him that he could no longer hide the truth, since Huan had been detained. The gang leader said that he was an extremely stupid person because he couldn't even hold on to such a sweet position. The killer said that he was only worried about one thing, that Zhu might give them away. However, the leader urged him not to worry about this because Huan really wanted to live, and he understands perfectly well that if he gives them up, prison will seem like paradise to him. Returning to work with Yan, they were reprimanded by manager Liu, who was indignant about the absence of Qin and Ho, because they were obliged to be constantly near her and protect her, adding that some people wanted to rob her and the exhibition turned out to be a complete mess. The surprised young master asked the young lady what had happened. The girl explained that due to renovations, the exhibition was postponed for several days. Yan and Li calmly sat down on the sofa and said that since the problems were in the decoration of the room, there was nothing they could do to help her. The manager deliberately stated that the model party had ended yesterday. Lin suddenly approached them and said that she was heading home, and Qin needed to check everything here. The main character volunteered to give her a ride home. As he was about to leave, Xiu happily agreed and noted that if they left now, they would arrive by evening. The girl slept the whole way due to fatigue. Li secretly glanced at her. After a certain amount of time, evening came and they finally arrived, which Qing reported. The young lady reluctantly opened her eyes and saw that they were indeed at her house. She praised the boy for driving fast, and the teenager, in turn, said that he had a lot of experience in driving. Lin allowed him to drive home in the work car, but it would have to be returned tomorrow. However, as soon as she got out of the car, she accidentally twisted her ankle when she stepped on a stone. Lee heard Kyo's sharp cry and quickly ran out of the car to find out what happened. Running around the car, he discovered that the girl was sitting on the ground and holding her leg. King asked if she was okay. Lee replied that she had twisted her ankle and it was in a lot of pain. Naturally, the teenager, like a true gentleman, helped her to rise. But as soon as Q stood up, she was pierced by a wild pain and instantly fell down. The young man reacted in time and managed to catch her, and then took her in his arms. King said that he would rather take her home since she couldn't put any weight on her leg right now, stating that she had nothing to worry about and that he would hold her tightly. Kyo, in turn, looked into his bottomless eyes and agreed. After carrying the young lady home, the boy asked her if she had any healing oil. Lin began to remember where she kept her medicine and asked him to look on the shelf. The young man poured oil on his hand and said that it was better to rub the leg now, because if it swelled, it would hurt much more. Lee rubbed ointment on her and told her that there was no fracture, but she would have to rub oil in every day to make it go away. The pain during the rubbing process was unbearable, but the girl held on. She only let out quiet moans, but she knew it was truly necessary. King noted that it would hurt even more now and she would have to endure it a little. Q replied that she could handle it because she had an important meeting tomorrow that she couldn't miss. A few minutes later, the guy finished the procedure, and the happy girl said that the pain had subsided. The young master said that it was too late and he needed to return home, but Lin said that by the time he arrived, it would already be dawn and invited him to stay with her. The stunned protagonist asked her again if she really wanted him to spend the night with her. Q responded positively and said that she had a guest room where he could sleep. The next morning, the guy hurried to take a shower, which he loved to do. It suddenly occurred to him that he hadn't really thanked Hao and the others, and he would need to rectify the situation. Suddenly, a wild scream from a girl rang out through the house, and Lee knew he had to come to her aid. King ran to her room wearing just a towel, thinking that she had been kidnapped again. The worried young man ran in hastily and asked if everything was okay with her. The teenager discovered that she had twisted her ankle again, and Q was also wearing only a towel. They looked at each other for a long time with their puzzled expressions, without saying a word, after which our heroes began to scream loudly, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, they fell silent and Lee apologized for intruding, as he thought she was in trouble again. Kyo noticed his numerous scars and asked where he got so many injuries on his body. They didn't look fresh, and some looked like they had bullet holes in them, so Lin began to examine them closely. King, in turn, hurried out of her room and said that if everything was okay, then he would go. The young master noticed that she was indeed attentive and he almost let it slip. After a certain amount of time, the teenager prepared a delicious breakfast and they sat down at the table. Kyo was surprised by the guy's cooking skills and asked what seasoning he added. The young man said that he didn't know how to thank her for her help and so he decided to make her a snack. Lin said that if he wanted to help, he should guard the exhibition and protect Chen. The protagonist stated that he would do his best and that she had nothing to worry about. The young lady finished her delicious breakfast and said that in a few days she and Chen would fly there. Lee, in turn, finally went home, where Sister Hua was in trouble. 3 unknown guys forced her to sell her house and threatened her with physical violence. Naturally, Flora refused them and said that if they did not leave immediately, she would call the police. The leader of the thugs ordered his henchmen to throw away her phone. Subsequently, one of them instantly snatched the cell phone from her and smashed it on the floor. The angry girl said that this phone costs a lot of money and they are obliged to compensate her for it. The leader of the group just looked at her with his cold gaze. Hua was furious and continued to stand her ground, but suddenly he moved closer to her, and he suggested that she have a good time, saying that she would definitely like it. At that moment, an angry Lee burst into the apartment and grabbed the scoundrel by the head. The little sister was shocked by the cruelty of her brother, who began to beat the bandit. The teenager literally pressed his bloody face into the floor and continued to punch him. The rest of the thug's frightened accomplices simply stood aside. King said that no one dares to cause chaos in his house and will pay for it. The henchmen were worried about their leader, but did not risk attacking the young man. The bandit said that the teenager would not live any longer, since he had connections. Lee said he didn't care about his connections, and he could personally make sure they didn't live to see tomorrow. The guy with the broken nose said that he couldn't scare them and they wouldn't stop. King replied that he was giving them one last chance to leave now alive. Otherwise, there would be irreversible consequences. Then he shouted again for them to get out of his house immediately. The gang leader realized that at this point they definitely couldn't handle the teenager. In connection with this, they hurried to leave the apartment, but threatened that they would return. The young master immediately rushed to his sister and asked if everything was okay with her. Hua was shocked by her brother's other side. She had never seen him so cruel. Lee, in turn, assumed that she was simply scared of these thugs and helped her get up. The girl picked up her broken phone and said that she would have to buy a new one. A few minutes later, the guy collected all his things and announced that he was ready to go to his aunt. Because these scum might come back, and so she will have to live with the old lady for a while. He would also need to leave for a few days. Hua didn't mind, and said that he could calmly go about his business. After some time, they were already standing at Van's door and ringing her doorbell, but no one answered. The little sister noticed that the aunt had poor hearing, and perhaps she should shout to her. King, in turn, took a deep breath and loudly shouted the old woman's name. A moment later, Wong suddenly opened the front door and hit the young man with it. Meanwhile, the guy with the broken nose ran to his brother to deal with one guy. "Who turned out to be the hired killer, Chuo?" he asked. "What happened?" The young man began to tell that he had come to sort things out with the residents in the old area. But in the end, some teenager had beaten him up. The brother asked why he didn't take fighters with him and what the name of this unknown guy was. The beaten boy said that he asked around and found out his name, Ching. Naturally, he understood perfectly well who this man was and who his good-for-nothing brother had gotten involved with. The killer said that these people would never understand what a great value they had before their eyes, after which he said that there was one very important task for him. The younger one was surprised. The killer urged him to find out about the past of this very Lee, and the information must be searched for very carefully. At this moment, the main character asked Hua not to appear in the technical center until his arrival. The old woman was irritated by their conversation and urged them not to behave like newlyweds. Flora didn't understand what she was talking about and asked why she was speaking like that. King hurried to leave and asked his aunt to look after his sister. Suddenly, Hua stopped him and hugged him tightly. The teenager was even at a loss. The girl very convincingly asked him to return quickly and to be careful on the road. At this time, the company's employees were waiting for the young master at the airport. The guy was nervous that Lee had not shown up. The flight was already very soon, but the girl urged him not to worry so much. A moment later, King showed up and apologized for being late. He added that there were big traffic jams along the way and so he had to run. The surprised manager asked if he had really run to the airport. At that moment, the flight announced its landing, and they hurried to the plane. After a certain time, they were already sitting in the plane and taking off into the air. The guy immediately stared at his laptop and went about his business. Lee introduced himself and asked his name. The company employee gave his name as Wong and said that he was from the finance department. Then he introduced the young man to a girl named Peach. She was the assistant of manager Liu. Suddenly, an unknown person in the salon began to express his dissatisfaction with the cold coffee. The flight attendant was surprised and noted that he himself asked to make him cold coffee, but the guy demanded that it be made hot. And when he gave the cup back, he accidentally spilled it on himself. He started saying that it was a very expensive shirt and blamed the girl for what happened. The frightened young lady in turn replied that she would bring him a towel right away. However, the troublemaker did not calm down and declared that the towel would not be able to remove the stain. Suddenly, he grabbed her hand and began to shake the girl, saying that they were obliged to compensate for the damage. Jin decided to stand up for the flight attendant and hit the impudent passenger's hand, after which he declared that he had spilled coffee on himself and that the poor girl was not to blame for anything. In response, the man immediately struck him and Wong flew to the side. He said that it was none of his business and that he clearly shouldn't meddle in other people's affairs. The flight attendant asked the passenger to calm down and said she was ready to pay for the cost of his shirt. But he said that it was from a new collection and cost $20,000. The girl was shocked by the price of some t-shirt and didn't know what to do. Wong pointed out that this rag could not be worth that much money and called him an extortionist. The man grabbed him again and urged him not to interfere if he valued his life. However, the brave Jen said that he was not afraid of him and that he was now breaking the law. The enraged passenger lifted him up and angrily said that he was already irritating him, and the law most likely won't help him when it starts beating him. Peach suddenly interrupted them and said that she was the ambassador of this brand, and that the shirt was a fake. The man, in turn, was seething with anger and declared that if she didn't understand, then it would be better for her not to interfere. At this point, the entire salon began to express their dissatisfaction and say that his t-shirt was a fake. The passenger began to look around, from where insults and threats poured out at him. A moment later, an air police officer approached and asked what had happened. Everyone started telling him what had happened, and only Liu slept peacefully with her headphones on and missed the performance. As a result, the passenger was nevertheless escorted out of the cabin, and upon arrival, the flight attendant ran up to Van. The guy, in turn, did not understand what had happened again, which is what he asked the girl about. In response, the young lady began to thank him for his help and remarked that he was a very brave man. Then she even asked him for his phone number so that she could invite him to dinner as a thank you. Zhen hurried to give her his business card, while Qing envied him and did not understand why no one asked him for his phone number. Peach urged him to leave them alone and go with her to a place. Li asked where they were going, after which the girl took him to the shops located in the shopping center. The surprised young man asked if she had really invited him to go shopping. The young lady said that she would like to buy some things, but not for herself, but for him, because manager Liu ordered him to update his sloppy clothes. But Qing didn't think so. However, Peach insisted that they go shopping and find him some suitable clothes. The teenager replied that he hated wearing tuxedos and similar suits. The assistant noted that the manager said that if he refused to wear it, she would report his irresponsibility to Miss Q. Finally, the young master agreed to wear whatever she said and asked her to pick out a suit for him. A few minutes later, Peach picked out a pair of shoes and a suit for him and asked him to try them on. A moment later, Li came out of the fitting room and asked if the clothes suited him. The girl said that would be fine, but he would also need a haircut. At this time, Liu was choosing underwear for a photo shoot and could not decide on a choice. She later opted for a push-up bra to highlight her maturity. At that moment, there was an unexpected knock at her door. The manager was not prepared for it. She hurried to hide all her things and ran to open the front door. She was surprised when she saw Peach on the threshold and asked if they had really finished it so quickly. The girl noted that Qin had a great figure, and so choosing a suit was not difficult. At this time, the teenager was trying to take off his extremely tight tie, saying that a suit would be enough. The surprised manager asked the guy who he was, and the equally shocked protagonist replied that he was Li. Peach in turn asked Liu if she had picked out an evening dress for herself. The young lady said that she was having problems with that. King finally figured out the tie and took it off, realizing that this was the reason he was dressed like that. Then he noted that since the banquet would only be in the evening, he could at least take off his jacket and shirt. The manager noticed the teenager undressing and literally couldn't take her eyes off him. Suddenly, she grabbed his hand. Qing did not understand this maneuver and looked at the girl. The manager asked him to change in another room because he should show himself at least a little respect. Li didn't understand what exactly she was talking about, but Peach noticed that Liu blushed. Finally, evening came, and our handsome heroes went to the festive banquet. Most of the guests immediately turned their attention to them, realizing what influential people had appeared. The manager said that celebrities from all over the world had been invited here to publicize the lingerie show, and she even invited Lisa with her help, which should definitely make the show a success. Suddenly, a male voice called out to her. The young man said that he dreamed of meeting Liu. The manager noted that it was she who should have sought a meeting with him, since their company had entered the foreign market. At that moment, his sister came up to them and asked if this shorty was really his competitor. Keen got angry at her and replied that she would rip out her tongue if she continued to be rude to her. The girl also got excited, but Lin hastened to calm the girls down and noted that Miss Chen had a good reputation. The young master had a different opinion and thought that she didn't care about her own reputation at all. Suddenly, a stranger with blue hair appeared in the hall, catching many glances. It was Lisa. Some literally went crazy from her gaze and began to whisper among themselves. She found her beloved Li in the crowd and immediately called out to him. Everyone was surprised and wanted to understand who she had paid attention to and who had been awarded such an honor. The main character, in turn, realized that he had not managed to hide from her sight. He had no choice but to turn around and greet her. Lisa said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Xing replied with a smile that they had indeed not met for a long time. The girl said that she had flown from far away specifically to find him. The guy tried to get away from her in an extremely awkward way and said that he had urgent business, after which he rushed off in an unknown direction. Lisa asked him to keep her company, but the young man still ran away. Surprised, Chen asked if she knew her bodyguard. The young lady was also surprised that Li worked for her company and said that she now agreed to participate in the show. Liu, who did not understand anything, thanked her for her help. Lisa was thinking about only one thing: to finally catch up with the teenager. At the end of the banquet, the curious manager asked Qin how he knew her. The guy replied that he once helped her. Hao asked him to get a couple of autographs for his brother, as he liked her so much. Businesslike Chen said that if he asked her nicely, she would think about it. Yan noted that he was talking to Li. Peach urged everyone to have a good rest and leave the discussions for tomorrow. Meanwhile, an unknown girl in a peculiar costume stood on the roof of the building in the middle of the night. Sister urged her to be careful since Liu had a bodyguard. But the self-confident lady said that she would carry out the order in any case, no matter how long it took. Kine herself naturally slept soundly and did not suspect anything. The killer, in turn, began to act and moved extremely deftly along the balconies of the building. Thus, in a couple of minutes, she easily reached Chen's room. The young master instantly woke up from some suspicious rustling sound. The killer entered the room completely freely, since Liu did not close the balcony door and windows. She immediately took out her knife and quietly crept up to the sleeping Qin. The girl naively believed that she would soon cope with this easy task. But suddenly the interior door creaked, and the main character saw a stranger. The killer realized with horror that there was someone else in the room and her plan had not worked. In connection with this, she immediately rushed to the balcony, intending to hide as quickly as possible. However, Li still caught up with her and grabbed her. The young lady understood that he was a capable person, since he had covered the distance quite quickly and was holding her tightly. Not allowing her to move, Qing asked what she was doing there. Naturally, the killer ignored him and tried to deliver a roundhouse kick. But the guy blocked her attack in time, which greatly surprised the killer. At this time, Lisa was immersed in her memories associated with the young master. When she lost faith in herself and asked him to leave her, since death was already near, but the task seemed impossible, and the tearful girl begged him to leave. However, the brave protagonist declared that everything is not as it seems to her and there is a way out. Li grabbed her hand and pulled her along, telling her that he would not let her die. Her difficult memories were interrupted by an assistant who said that she needed to go to rehearsal. Since then, Qing has become a very dear person to Lisa, because he once again instilled in her faith in the best. She naively believed that the teenager belonged only to her and no one else. At that moment, the guy felt a chill run down his spine. Suddenly, a worried Peach ran up to him and asked where manager Lu was. The young man asked what had happened. The young lady replied, Lisa refused to participate in the show. Manager Chen suddenly showed up and was surprised that the girl had refused to perform. Keen immediately demanded that she be given a contract so that she could talk to her. The teenager thought that the manager usually behaved like a crazy person, but now she pulled herself together. At this moment, Li was called out by an uninvited guest, who turned out to be Anne. The young man, in turn, was extremely surprised to see her in such a place. Chen went to sort things out with Lisa, but the businesswoman flatly refused to take part in this event. Seeing her chin, she said that if Liu gives her this guy, she will agree to go on the show. Everyone was shocked. The secretary confidently said that she would never get this teenager. After all, her company clearly doesn't engage in human trafficking, and Lisa didn't like that. She approached her and brazenly asked who she was. Qing replied that she was a secretary. The cunning young lady declared that there was no place for assistance here, and she would find out Chen's opinion. However, Anne noted that the manager would also listen to her decision. Lisa asked if she liked Li too, and the assistant retorted that she was simply protecting her employee's personal space, adding that it was with her that he would be completely safe, and this applied to absolutely all members of their company. At a certain point, Qing could not stand it any longer and urged the stubborn girl not to throw a circus. Since she had promised him, Lisa nervously replied that he was the only stubborn one here, since everything could have been settled long ago. The young master said that manager Chen had no right to order him around and that he would make the decision personally. The young lady smiled and said that she was just making fun of Qin, then finally agreed to take part in the show. A few minutes later, the show started and Liu asked Anne why she had come. The secretary said she just wanted to see her. After some time, the event finally ended. The assistant thanked the participants and let them go to rest. Lisa naturally went to her lover and said that she was very tired. Suddenly, she slipped and fell right on the young man. He asked if she was okay. The cunning girl said in a tired voice that her legs hurt terribly and asked him to stretch them a little. Hearing this, Anne became furious and suddenly jumped up from her seat, and the perplexed Liu asked where she went. Li in turn urged Lisa not to drag him out, but the irrepressible lady declared that she intended to have dinner with him. However, Qing asked them to wait, and the dissatisfied assistant cast a withering glance at her. The secretary said that she needed to discuss a couple of work issues with the young man. Lisa was against it and said that they could talk about work later, but now it was a break and they were going to have a bite to eat. The assistant noted that if she was so hungry, she might as well go and eat first. They continued to bicker and argue for a long time. Ching stood aside and understood that it would never end. Hao suddenly approached him and suggested that they go out for a bite to eat. The young master happily agreed and said that he had come at a very opportune time. The girls continued to snap at each other, blaming each other for their behavior being the reason he left. Yan asked how long he had known Lisa. The protagonist replied that he had not known her for long, adding that she was too unrestrained and sometimes impossible to bear. The whole time the killer's assistant was eavesdropping on them. After which, unknown killers sent a photograph of Lee to headquarters to collect detailed information about him. The girl noted that now everything would be much easier because they would learn the teenager's weak points. Suddenly, she asked why her sister was always wearing a mask and whether it was hot in it. In response, the killer asked her why she always wore glasses, since it was bad for her eyesight. At that moment, a message came from headquarters, and they immediately began to read it. The assistant was shocked by the boss's response, and the killer asked what had happened. The girl said that the center ordered them to immediately retreat from this mission. The assistant immediately gathered her things and headed for the exit, then urged her to do the same. However, the extremely stubborn killer stated that she would not give up halfway. The young lady was stunned by her decision and recommended that she listen to her superiors, since even they did not want to get involved with him. But the killer said that they didn't have to engage him in battle and should just wait for the right moment. The assistant insisted on her own and stated that if they disobeyed, they could suffer greatly. The girl, in turn, understood perfectly well that she was right and she still had to retreat. After some time, they were already halfway to headquarters and spent the night in a tent in the forest. Naturally, the killer could not come to terms with her defeat, and she lost sleep. After thinking about what was happening for a long time, she became convinced that her assistant was asleep and began to act. Having tracked down the teenager, she saw him go out into the street late at night. This means that it is necessary to quickly get things done and finally complete the task. The girl saw a wallet in his hands and came to the conclusion that he was heading to the store. However, the closest one was quite far away and she had plenty of time. The killer didn't wait long and climbed the building again via the balconies. After walking several dozen meters, the young master looked for the store but could not find it. Meanwhile, Chen was taking a shower absolutely calmly and didn't suspect anything. A moment later, the killer appeared in the room. She took out her knives and headed to the bathroom. Suddenly, the soap slipped from Chen's hands and she bent down to pick it up. At that very moment, the killer stabbed her with a knife, but was only able to cut air. The girl, in turn, was shocked by the shorty's luck. Liu thought that it was because of the draft that a slight wind had risen. However, turning to the moved curtain, Chen thought about it, because she had moved it earlier. But she didn't pay much attention to it and lay down in the bath filled with foam. The killer began to sneak up on her again to finally finish the job. But at that very moment, Chen's phone rang, and the killer was completely scared. Liu calmly picked up the phone and began to have a casual conversation with someone. The girl instantly hid behind the curtain. Chen suddenly began to call Peach. Hao replied from behind the door that she had gone somewhere and that he was the only one left in the room. The killer was completely taken aback, realizing that the task was becoming more difficult with every second. At this time, Yan shouted through the door asking if the manager needed help. The manager, in turn, kindly asked him to bring her a towel, which was lying on her bed where the guy immediately headed. The killer knew she had to figure out where to hide before this young man returned. As soon as Hao shouted that he had found a towel and was bringing it to her, the girl instantly jumped aside. The teenager was already heading towards her. The manager hurried Yan and said that the door was not locked. The killer didn't know what to do or where to run, because the guy would come in now and find her. The bodyguard warned Chen again that he was already coming in and bringing her a towel. Hao calmly entered the bathroom and placed a towel on the dresser. Chen thanked the young man for his help. At this time, the killer was hanging from the ceiling and seemed to be holding on with her last strength. Suddenly, her hair fell down. The girl became nervous and did not know what to do. The hair slowly fell, floating in the air, and the killer's heartbeat quickened. Finally, it fell right on Yan's nose, who was simply perplexed. The guy picked up the hair and wondered how it could have fallen from the ceiling. As soon as Hao raised his head up to see where the hair might have fallen from, he was suddenly called out by a joyful young master who announced that he had brought food. Yan got distracted and went to his room to finally have a good snack. The killer sighed with relief and made sure that the teenager had left the confines of the bathtub, after which she quietly went downstairs. She was lucky that she was wearing gloves with suction cups. However, her back was directly in front of Chen, who had just come out of the bath. Hao and Qing were already quietly having dinner. At this time, when suddenly Liu's loud cry rang out, the girl called for help and screamed that there was a killer in her bathroom. The guys immediately rushed to her. A few minutes later, they finally caught the killer and hurried to tie her up. Then they began to interrogate who sent her and why she wanted to kill manager Qin. However, the girl chose to remain silent and ignored them. Yan repeated the question again. The protagonist urged him to remove her mask to find out who she really is. Finally, the lady spoke up and said that if they did this, she would kill their families. In response, the guys just laughed and said that she wouldn't scare them with that. But just at that moment, someone rang their doorbell and everyone was extremely surprised. After all, at such a late hour, they were not expecting anyone and could only guess who had decided to disturb them. When they opened the door, they saw a police officer standing on the threshold, who stated that he had been informed of a break-in. And for their safety, he must make sure that it is not a robber and that everything is okay with them. A delighted Li replied that he was just in time, as they had caught the trespasser, after which they handed the killer over to him. The policeman assured them that he would deliver her to the station. As soon as the door slammed shut, he urged the girl to get out of here quickly. Then he took off his wig and it turned out that it was her little sister who came to her aid. The enraged girl took off the remaining camouflage clothing, and along the way she scolded the killer, saying that if she had not helped her, the consequences would have been irreversible. King, in turn, decided to check and looked out the window. He heard them talking about some Lin. The young ladies were unhappy with such a risky task and said that they should give up the matter. Hao also overheard their conversation and asked if they were talking about the line. Li immediately asked the manager if she knew someone named Lin, who clearly had a grudge against her. Chen replied that there was only one person, and that was Lin Hai, whom they met at a banquet and their companies were competing with each other. King urged her to be on guard because Hai would clearly not stop there and would do something else. After a certain amount of time, a huge number of people gathered before the start of the show. The young master noted that the event had not even begun, but there was already such a stir. Liu noted that this is the largest lingerie show in the country's history and that many celebrities from all over the world are there. Anne said that so many people could bring more trouble and asked if Chen was concerned about safety. Tin replied that Hu had brought many guards and everything would be fine. At the same time, Yan was trying to calm down the inadequate fans who were shouting that they adored Lisa. Li, in turn, could not even imagine that she would have so many fans. An anxious Liu asked her if she was ready for the show and if everything was going according to plan. The girl said that everything was fine with her and she was ready for the event. Keen breathed a sigh of relief and said that she needed to check on the others. Lisa urged the protagonist to stay for a very important conversation, but Qing said that he needed to make sure the manager was safe and so they would talk later. The indignant lady asked if he really didn't like her that much. The teenager, in turn, said that he had not said such a thing and that this was not the issue at all. A disgruntled Chen noted that she would wait for them outside and they could discuss everything calmly. A sad Lisa began to ask Li why he was constantly avoiding her, since she had been looking for him for so long. The young man replied that he was avoiding not only her, but also the life he had led until recently. The girl didn't understand and asked why he didn't want to turn everything back because those were good times. King said that she didn't need him, but someone who would always protect her and get her out of trouble. And then he saved her only because at that moment it was his mission. A few minutes later, the lingerie show finally opened, and it was a truly grand celebration for the people. Young girls walked along the catwalk and charmed everyone present. Hao noted that everything was going quite well, and Li agreed with him on this issue. Everyone could not take their eyes off the beautiful ladies and their charming figures. The show soon ended, as announced by the host of the event. However, the fans were not going to leave the room, especially because of Lisa. The girl was literally surrounded by crowds of celebrities and journalists who were eager to talk to her, and said that everything went more than successfully, and manager Chen agreed with her. Liu told Liza that she had worked hard and would receive a bonus soon, and Chin also invited her to dinner. The young lady became modest and stated that it was all thanks to teamwork. The manager noticed a huge number of fans of her so-called creativity. Suddenly, one of them managed to escape, and passing the guards, he ran towards his favorite. The guy was running with a huge bouquet of flowers and began to confess his love to her, saying that he is her biggest fan and simply adores her, after which he asked to take a photo with her. The girl didn't really like such moments. Suddenly, the young master saw something sticking out from under the teenager's t-shirt. Naturally, the main character in turn called on him to show what he was hiding there. Then he ordered them to turn out all their pockets and show their contents, at which moment an unknown person in a mask approached them from behind. Lai was busy with a young man who happened to have a folding knife. Ching asked why he brought it here. The situation was getting tense. The stranger continued to confidently walk towards them. Anne noticed the unknown man and asked herself the logical question of who he was. Suddenly, she saw a knife in his hand. The secretary was shocked. She didn't know what to do and immediately rushed towards Qin, as she understood that he intended to kill him. As a result, the killer waved his hand and blood was spilled, after which the killer hurried away. Kind began to lose consciousness and grabbed Li. He did not understand what was happening and turned back sharply. The puzzled guy asked her what happened and why she grabbed onto him. A moment later, the assistant collapsed to the floor, and the young man saw that she was covered in blood. The stunned teenager did not understand how this could happen and who did it. The assistant only managed to raise her head and say in a muffled voice that he was in danger. Then the girl finally lost consciousness, and everyone present was also in shock. Within seconds, they called an ambulance to take her to the hospital. Anne was subsequently hospitalized, and Ching and Lisa sat outside the operating room. The girl noted that he never managed to escape from his past life. Adding that he was the killer's real target, Li bowed his head and remained silent. He understood perfectly well that they wanted to kill him, and the brave Ching took the blow upon herself. Lisa continued to add fuel to the fire and said that the anger that arose because of him touched the people around him. And it doesn't matter how well he can hide, because sooner or later punishment will still catch up with him. After a certain amount of time, the surgeon came out of the operating room and said that the operation was over. Li immediately jumped up to him and asked how Anne was feeling. The doctor replied that the danger had passed. He added that she had 16 stitches and would recover in a few months. Lisa suddenly realized that he would never have a normal life because he was in constant danger. Meanwhile, Ching was transferred to a ward where she slept and gradually gained strength. Suddenly, Anne opened her eyes and stared blurrily at the ceiling. Lisa noticed that the girl woke up and sat down next to her. The young lady asked how she was feeling and offered her some water. The still very weak assistant rose from her hospital bed and began to look around. The girl noticed that Li was not there and had gone downstairs for food, then handed her a glass of water. Anne thanked her and took the cup, after which she took a couple of sips. Lisa said that if she were in her place, she would have done the same and protected the guy, adding that she was aware of all the events and knew how he once helped her. However, if you constantly show concern for him, he will begin to feel awkward. Kinga replied that she understood this perfectly well and simply did not want him to get hurt. A couple of days later, Anne moved to a wheelchair and wanted to be discharged from the hospital, but Chen was against it. But the girl said that she was too bored here and she really wanted to go home. She also said that she hadn't been on vacation for a long time, and that during this time she would completely recover. Lisa was surprised by this decision and did not understand when she began to show her feelings for Li. At that moment, a young master approached her and asked if Ching had really been discharged from the hospital. The young lady replied that she got bored in the hospital and returned home. She is also planning to leave tomorrow, and if there is an opportunity, they will meet him again. Anne, in turn, did not want to force him to take care of her just because of the injury, and after recovery, she would meet Li again. After a certain time, it became sharply colder outside, and it even started snowing. The main character wandered sadly around the city and headed home to Aunt Wang and Hua. But when he rang the doorbell, no one answered, so he started shouting at her. But this also did not produce any results. Suddenly, at this moment, Ching grabbed the door handle and it was unlocked. The young man shouted into the apartment, asking why Wang hadn't closed the front door. However, when he entered the house, he did not find anyone and began to look around. Naturally, Li realized that something bad had happened here and began to examine the entire house. He found dried porridge on the kitchen floor, which meant it had happened a long time ago. The broth on the stove had long since gone bad, as evidenced by the disgusting smell. Turning around, the teenager found a knife with a piece of paper on the interior door. Coming closer, Ching saw drops of blood on the paper and a note that if he reported it to the police, the old woman and sister would die. The young master, in turn, instantly became furious and began to act. Li went outside to find someone who could give him the information he needed. Two guys were selling something at such a late hour. One of them called his friend to go home, since there were no buyers. Another noted that if they returned without money, the boss would fire them. Suddenly, the main character approached them. They thought he was a buyer, but Ching asked them to tell him where the gang in colorful shirts was hiding. The young man noted that he was not going to give out such information to an unknown person. Naturally, the only key to them was money, and the teenagers immediately gave away the location of the group. However, they asked for a fairly large sum of money, and Lee subsequently satisfied their requests. At that time, the killer's younger brother was relaxing peacefully in a club with his girlfriend. Suddenly, he jumped up from his seat and told her that he would be back soon. The young lady was waiting for him impatiently. The guy had drunk quite a lot, so he hurried to find a restroom. A moment later, he was calmly doing his business when he suddenly heard a rustling sound behind him. Kang immediately put a knife to his throat and asked him why he had kidnapped his sister and aunt. The teenager in turn stated that he had been confused with someone else and did not understand what was being discussed. Lee pressed the blade to his neck and said that he was giving him one last chance to tell everything. Finally, the young man said in a trembling voice that he would tell everything and did not want to die. King ordered him to climb out the window onto the street and then went after him himself. After which they got into his car and Lee demanded that he take him to his family. Of course, the frightened bandit agreed to do everything and started the car. Arriving at the scene, he began to say that he only wanted to scare them and that he had no choice. Since he was following the orders of his superiors, he simply had to buy the house. They slowly moved deeper into the building and entered some office, where the thug approached the closet and, having performed a certain trick, something clicked. A few seconds later, a secret door opened in the wall and they walked inside along the corridor. The guy continued to say that he would have let his family go anyway. He added that in a few meters they would arrive at the place and he would see his relatives. He himself thought about how to outwit him and continued to lead him down the long corridor. Suddenly, the fire alarm went off and water started pouring from the sensors on the ceiling. Lee began to look around, not understanding what had happened. At that moment, the bandit ran into the gap between the walls. Kang immediately rushed there, but it immediately closed. The young man called for him to leave immediately. The thug began to gloat and said that he could not open the stone wall, adding that he would now have to sit there until he died of hunger. Meanwhile, Chuo asked his protege how things were going with the teenager. The killer replied that his relatives were under their control, and now all that was left was to wait for him to show up to them himself. The leader noted that this young man was taking on too much and was always sticking his nose into other people's business, so he needed to be eliminated. Lee, in turn, realized that in fact his aunt and sister were not here, which he asked the young man through the wall. The teenager admitted that they really weren't there, and he just wanted to lure him here to finally get rid of him, adding that they were kidnapped specifically in order to catch him and sort things out. The business thug said that he had run into the wrong people and that death was now awaiting him. As for his lovely little sister, Ching doesn't need to worry since he will personally take care of her. After all, he had liked her for a long time. At that moment, the young master took off his jacket. The bandit continued to say various nasty things about his relatives, but Lee kept himself under control. The guy couldn't shut up and said that for the moment he was forced to hang around here. The protagonist began to warm up while such a self-confident scumbag tried to insult him. He suddenly wondered why Ching had been silent and unresponsive all this time. However, a few seconds later, the guy broke through the wall with a crushing blow. The thug, in turn, immediately flew to the side. One of the fragments of the flying stones cut his face. In front of him stood an enraged Lee, who instantly crawled through the hole in the wall. The stunned bandit could not believe what was happening and asked how he did it. At this time, Wang brought Hua something to eat, but the girl went on a hunger strike. Dee asked if she really wanted to die of hunger. Since Flora would not achieve anything by doing so, he repeated his demand again, but the young lady remained silent. Then the killer said that if she ate it, he would kill the old woman in the next room. Hua, in turn, said that if he let his auntie go, she would eat. And if they need this house so much, then she agrees to sell it, but the old woman has nothing to do with it. Wang silently handed her a bowl of food and shouted for her to eat it all immediately, or he would cut off her aunt's hand and feed it to her, then put a plate next to her. Suddenly, Die was called out and told that someone was calling him, and the killer picked up the phone. And he hurried to pick up the phone, but there was only silence in response, and he called on the stranger to speak. Lee called him by name and said he was willing to exchange his henchmen for his family, and if he doesn't believe him, he can pass the phone to his younger brother. After which, he called on him to name the time and place so that they could make the exchange. But Wang said that if he was so eager to save his family, he would have to find them himself. Then he simply hung up, and his subordinate asked him what had happened. Dee just smiled and said that an extremely interesting performance would soon begin. Lee was unhappy with these negotiations, which were already over before they even began. Kang hoped that his sister and aunt were still alive and he could save them. Otherwise, he would destroy them all and not even spare their families. The guy was on edge. The young master slammed his younger brother Wang to the ground, and the young man groaned in pain. The main character nervously asked him where his brother was keeping his sister and aunt. However, the teenager turned out to be quite stubborn and replied that he would never tell him, adding that he would achieve nothing and would have to wait until his family died. Lee asked why he still defended his brother when he didn't care about him. But the stupid bandit believed that his older brother would definitely save him. Since they consciously chose this path and someone like him had to take this into account, soon they went to his house. The guy said that he deliberately found such a disgusting person like him. King didn't listen to him and concentrated on searching. The tied-up thug asked what he was trying to find. Lee continued to rummage through all the drawers and cabinets in search of at least some kind of clue, but he found nothing. The bandit noted that he would be better off starting to look for his loved ones instead, as they would soon die. The young man could not stand it and grabbed him, then repeated the question of where Wang was keeping his family, threatening physical violence. However, this did not frighten the younger brother Day, and he replied that if Ching killed him, he would never see his family again. The young master understood that he was trapped and that he really had no way out. Late at night, he decided to ask Captain Shin for help. A moment later, Tan's phone rang in her office. The girl was having dinner at that moment. She hurried to finish eating and answer the call. Picking up the receiver, the captain asked who it was. When she learned that it was Lee, she asked if he had gotten a new number. The teenager replied that he had borrowed a phone from a friend, and Shin asked what he wanted. The main character asked her if she knew where Van was now, and the young lady was surprised. Tan assumed that the guy was in trouble again and asked what happened. The young man, in turn, lied that his neighbor's son had fallen into bad company and now he needed to be rescued from there, adding that he was a good boy, but he needed to be returned home to his parents. Sin agreed to help him and said that she would now send him his home address. Tan sent him the address, realizing that Lee had another problem. Meanwhile, Hao came to the young master, and the teenager rang the doorbell. The main character hurried to open the door and asked him to go inside as he had urgent business with him. A puzzled Yan asked what had happened and why he needed him so late at night. Adding that he had finally bought himself a phone, Ching remained silent and they walked into the room. Entering the room, the teenager saw an unknown guy tied to a chair and asked who it was. The young man asked him to look after the man while he sorted out some issues. Hao again asked what had happened and stated that it was considered a kidnapping. Lee noted that he needed to find his sister and aunt, and he just had to keep an eye on this scum. Yan assumed that he wanted to beat the address of their location out of this man, but Ching said that he had already led him into a trap before, and therefore there was no need for this. The guy offered his help in finding his family, but the teenager refused. He stated that he did not intend to involve a large number of people in this matter and would sort everything out himself. Lee immediately went to the bandit's subordinate and began asking him where his sister and aunt might be, but the beaten thug said he didn't know anything, and Ching called him too stubborn. After which he threw him bloody objects that belonged to his patron. The guy was shocked and said that it was his big brother's amulet and he always carried it with him. Then the young master came up with a trump card and threw the bloody eye to the ground. The gang member, scared to death, literally began to stutter and speak incoherently. The protagonist noted that this was his leader's eyeball and he should not remain silent. But the stubborn thug continued to insist that he had said everything he knew. Suddenly, the bandit burst into tears like a child and began to beg Lee to let him go. King, in turn, nervously crushed his eye and left in an unknown direction. However, the gang member was not so stupid and smelled the scent. He declared that it was a pig's eye. The teenager threatened him that if he didn't tell him, there would actually be a human eye lying there. At this time, Day was asked by his protege whether this scum would definitely not do anything to his younger brother. Van confidently said that he wanted to save his family, and therefore the guy was not in any danger. When asked if he had calmed the women down, the henchman replied that they were fine. D assumed that very soon he would find them and at the same time find his death. At this moment, the two bandits decided to help Hua's brother, who was being watched by Hu. Suddenly, Qiang heard some sounds inside, which he reported to his accomplice. Another thug urged him to wait for reinforcements, since it was unknown how many people were there. But the guy was sure that the two of them could handle it, and Day would be happy when they freed his younger brother. Suddenly, someone rang the doorbell, and Yan was confused and couldn't figure out who it was. After all, at such a late hour, only those who wanted to rescue their friend could come. Either Ching had returned. Hao slowly walked towards the front door. He saw a food delivery man through the peephole, which was extremely suspicious. Because he didn't order any food, or the guy just got the address wrong. At this time, A gun was suddenly put to the back of his head and he was ordered not to move. Yang said that if he made even the slightest move, he would end up with a bullet in his head, adding that if necessary, he would kill the delivery man. Yan remained silent, after which they rushed towards Hua to untie him. Thus, the situation changed dramatically. The guy noted that they had done a good job and would receive a corresponding reward. Naturally, the thugs were very happy about this and thanked their leader. Verzila said that he needed to call to finally sort everything out, but the stupid Hua did not understand why this needed to be done and asked them. Jiang noted that Day demanded that he make a call when he was safe so that he could finally get rid of those women. And now he just needs to call him and they will be buried alive. Wang's younger brother liked this turn of events and smiled. Meanwhile, Dee's henchmen dragged Li's family in sacks to finish the job. Sister Hua was terribly afraid and understood what awaited her in the near future if only Qing did not arrive in time. The bandits, in turn, hurried to carry the bags with the stolen goods to the truck, after which they set off on their journey. One of them became afraid because they would take the sin upon themselves. Another said that this was the only chance to make a name for themselves, and they could not refuse such assignments. At this time, there were reinforced checkpoints on the roads where almost all cars were checked. They stopped the driver, who immediately began to say that he had not been drinking and driving, and the police officer asked him to show his documents. Then he was released. The guy noted that the captain did not need to come, since they could handle it themselves. Sin urged him to ignore her and do his job. Tang felt anxious after Qing's call and hoped that he was okay. Suddenly, the bandits discovered a police post ahead and didn't know what to do. The guy urged Madan to quickly turn around before the police spotted them, which is what he subsequently did. So the truck turned around right in front of the post and went in the other direction. Sign noticed this maneuver and ordered everyone to stop the truck immediately. Seeing that law enforcement officers were following them, they stepped on the gas. However, the police car quickly closed the distance between them. The frightened bandit urged his friend to drive even faster, otherwise they would be caught. Madan, in turn, demanded that the guy not yell at him since he already knew what to do. They didn't even notice how they managed to fly through a red light and drove on. The gang member saw many cars in front of him and tried to steer away. The resulting accident was a truly horrific sight. Madan's phone flew out of the cabin onto the asphalt and started ringing. Naturally, no one could pick up the phone. Hua listened to the beeps and didn't understand what was happening and why no one was picking up the phone. This is what he began to present to his charges, and they were also perplexed. The enraged thug asked if they really dared to play a prank on him. The bandits began to justify themselves by saying that there might be poor communication in the mountains. Hao, in turn, waited for the right moment and, with lightning-fast movement, grabbed the pistol, after which he pulled it forward. Suddenly, Zhang pulled the trigger and a shot was fired. The bullet instantly hit the unsuspecting Hua straight in the leg, who immediately screamed in wild pain. Yan began to act further. He delivered a quick blow to Zhang's stomach, but he never dropped the gun. Yan in turn pulled it again and the thug fired again. This time the bullet flew past the ear of the other big guy, catching the collar of his shirt. Hao immediately dealt him a crushing blow to the wrist, causing incredible pain. Thus, he literally broke his arm and the bandit screamed in pain. The young master instantly finally snatched his pistol and jumped up from his seat, after which he pointed the gun at them and ordered them not to make any sudden movements. Then he menacingly asked where his friend's sister and aunt were. Naturally, all three of them remained silent and had no intention of answering. Yan, without thinking twice, shot Zhang in the leg and he screamed loudly in pain. Another said they took them to the mountains to prepare them for burial. Hao knew he needed to call the police to start searching the area. He also needed to call Qin urgently, but the guy remembered that he didn't have a phone. Meanwhile, the main character hurried to the bandits' lair to free his family. The frightened servant immediately ran to Dee and said that the guy was already here. Van smiled and said that he had been waiting for this meeting for a long time and that it would finally happen. At this point, Lee had already begun to destroy the house and burst into the building, where he began to brutally beat local bodyguards who could do nothing to resist him. Suddenly, the rest of the gang rushed towards him, but they suffered the same fate. King, in turn, did not stand on ceremony with the thugs and dealt with them all very quickly. A moment later, the young master stood in the middle of the bandits he had scattered. As it turned out, Day had been watching what was happening the whole time and clapped his hands approvingly. Lee fixed his menacing gaze on him and silently looked at the leader of the group. Van noted that he was indeed a capable guy and quickly dealt with his men. He added that he had very good skills, and if the young man went over to his side, he would let his relatives go. The main character instantly rushed towards him and began to attack Dee. However, while delivering his most powerful blows, the thug dodged them quite deftly. He also blocked all of Chin's efforts without any difficulty and with an unperturbed expression on his face. But the teenager continued to press and strike, and Van, in turn, also deftly dodged. At one point, he attacked him, but the bandit blocked the blow once again. At the same time, he stepped back and the floor beneath his feet literally sank. Suddenly, it dawned on Dai that the blow had passed through the bones and broken through the floor. And there was only one person who was capable of such a technique. He was surprised. Wang said he had always been looking for this book and didn't think that its owner would be Li. King pretended not to understand what he was talking about and asked what book he was talking about. In response, Di stated that if the youth did give him the secret treatise, he would free his family. But the young master replied that he would rather throw it away, and even if he were destined to die, he would still not receive the book. Smiling Wang noted that he did have it after all, which meant that the book would soon be his, after which he rushed towards the main character with lightning speed, intending to attack him. King didn't expect such speed from him, and didn't understand how this was even possible. Di, in turn, actually moved quite quickly. The teenager couldn't even get a good look at him before the killer was already on the other side. Van literally started playing with him, running around him, Li trying to catch him. But all attempts were in vain, as if there were several people in front of him and not one. At a certain moment, Di dealt him a sharp blow and thereby wounded the young man. King knew he was in serious trouble because he didn't even notice Wang attacking him. A moment later, the killer hit him again, and Li again didn't have time to do anything. Thus, the leader of the thugs gradually dealt sharp blows. At some point, the guy stood there covered in blood and realized that this could end badly. Blood was dripping down onto his shoes and his sneakers were literally stained red. King could die at this rate, and he needed to catch him urgently to have a chance of survival. At this time, Di again called on him to return the secret book in exchange for his life, adding that he would not be able to escape and would only bleed to death until he finally died, as no one could match his speed. But unexpectedly, the teenager managed to grab his hand when he tried to attack again. This puzzled Van, as no one had ever managed to do this before, after which Li grabbed the idiot and threw him to the floor, thereby causing considerable damage. However, it is worth noting that Di was the only one who did not scream in pain, but courageously endured. Then the young master hastened to break his wrist, which the thug did not expect at all. The main character was able to break his bones in several places, which was quite painful, but at the same time, he seemed not to feel any pain. Van suddenly jumped up from his place and stood up on his feet. The killer was shocked by the teenager's abilities and did not understand how this was possible. In connection with this, I asked the young fighter how he managed to grab his hand. King noticed that he was not as fast as him, but he was able to predict his next move. Li in turn continued to bleed, which he noticed. Di asked another question. Could he really learn this from the secret book? In fact, the guy didn't have time to master this technique, but he was guided by his voice. Wang repeated his demand again and called on him to hand over the book, but the young man remained silent, after which he again rushed into his lightning-fast dance around Chin, repeating that he would let him and his family go if he nevertheless gave him the secret treatise, and if he doesn't make the right decision soon, his woman will die. Meanwhile, a worried Jin called Huo and asked where Li was. Yan in turn hurried to tell her about the situation that had happened. Stating that they had very little time and therefore needed to find Chin's family urgently, Tan replied that there was no need to look for them because they were in the hospital. At this moment, the police, led by Shin, arrived and detained Hua and his henchmen, sending them to the station. The girl, in turn, again asked Hao if he knew where exactly Li had gone. The young man replied that he had gone to look for Wang to save his family. After some time, they arrived at the required address, which was given to them by one of the bandits. Yan said that Qing should be here, and they hurried inside the building, where everything was turned upside down, windows were knocked out and doors were broken. Moving on, they found several beaten thugs lying unconscious on the floor. Behind the column sat the wounded Di. The killer was barely breathing and was in a deplorable state, after which he heard footsteps and realized that they had come for him and asked who they were looking for. Hao asked menacingly where Qing was now. Wang pretended not to understand what he was talking about. Then he told a made-up story about some teenager breaking in and killing them all, and then running off after his women. The bloodied killer smiled and said that he would find them quickly. The main character understood perfectly well that a lot of time had passed and they could be dead. However, it was unbearable to believe this. He ran through the forest thicket and shouted the name of his sister and aunt. There was a deathly silence in response. Dee said that he buried them under 2 lotus trees on the mountain near the stone with the mark. After wandering through the forest for some time, he finally found a stone with a cross. Realizing that they were here, Ching quickly began to dig up the earth with his bare hands. His heartbeat quickened. Lee refused to believe that he couldn't save them. Meanwhile, Van was informed that his sister and aunt were actually in the hospital. However, Dee was not particularly upset, but on the contrary, he broke into a sly smile. Sin said that she would send some of her men here and search for Ching, and Vanu informed him that he would be convicted of kidnapping and all his many crimes. A few minutes later, they climbed the mountain and the policeman shouted that he had found the guy. Adding that he had gone mad, Hao in turn immediately rushed after him. The law enforcement officer called on Lee to stop digging, but the young man seemed not to hear him. He continued to furiously dig a hole in the ground with his bloody hands and paid no attention to anyone. King shouted his sister's name and said that he still had time to save them. Yan also tried to calm him down, but the enraged young master pushed him away. Finally, the guy told him that his sister was now in the hospital. The extremely surprised protagonist sighed with relief and said out loud that she was alive. Naturally, they rushed to the hospital to Hua's room. Hao noticed that Tang intercepted them, and during the chase, they overturned the truck. One of the bandits died, and the second is in intensive care. Flora got off with a slight concussion. King looked at his sister and remained silent. He understood that, because of him, his family almost died. Yan, in turn, saw the state of the young man and asked what had happened, since they were alive. The teenager replied that nothing had happened and looked away. Hao said that he was not really to blame for what happened and that he should not blame himself. However, Lee stated that it was his fault that this happened, because everything could have been different. Because Dee only grabbed his sister to lure him out, and that's why she's here now. Also before this, Anne was wounded, and for the same reason, because they were trying to get to him. Suddenly, Ching began to remember how they met, how she first saw him outside her store, and then she offered him a job with her until he found a good job, and how Hua urged him not to worry about her so that he could finally get on with his life. Lee said that for her own safety he had to leave Flora, at which point a tear rolled down her cheek. After a while, Hao went to Miss Lin's office and reported that the maintenance departments were ready. Kyo said that Ching decided to live in the company's staff dormitory because he couldn't return home yet. The girl invited Yan to live with him, but the guy in turn refused. But Lin said that they had become so close lately and it would be more fun for him to live with a friend. However, Hao began to insist that he preferred to live alone. Kyo asked him to make concessions until a place in the dormitory became available. She added that even if the room was not freed up, she would ask her people to find him a place to live as soon as possible. The next morning, the young master hurried to Yan and rang the doorbell. Sleepy Hao slowly got out of bed and opened the front door. He looked at Lee with displeasure. Having stated that he had come too early and that at such a time he was still asleep, they then went inside. After which he showed him a free room and said that he could live there for now. Yan hurried to go to bed to finish sleeping, which he told the main character about. Suddenly, an unknown girl came out of his room and said that it was time for her to go to work. King was surprised when he found out that he actually had a young lady. The next day, the same picture happened, only with a different girl. On the third day, there was another person. The amorous Hao considered this to be in the order of things. Lee was shocked by the dissolute life he was leading.